For centuries, capitalists ruled the world. They crafted a dystopian hellscape and commodified everything. Life, democracy, even the planet. Facing extinction, a rebel group emerged to challenge the capitalists. The online left, a group of deviants, Zoomers, and millennial misfits devoted to shitposting their way to a better world, one tweet at a time. Will they put aside their hatred of one another to defeat their capitalist common enemy? Find out now on Dystopian Times.
Witness destruction of everything that you known. While others chase the elite, we stand alone. Dark days coming, we garners, we never running. People still suffering, and everybody's wondering who's gonna lead the charge, who's gonna be the choice. Rooted from the bottom so the underdog can have a voice. Foundation, based in reality. Power to the people, people power, not a fallacy. Call it what you want it, but I know you hear us coming. Eyes wide open, cause you see we're on to something. The future on the line. We're here to redefine. Political powers recognize these dystopian times.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a wonderful day. I just want to let you know how much I love you. I could be outside touching grass right now, which I desperately need to do. I could be playing The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword and getting through like the later half of the game. But I'm here because I love you, and I hope that you know that. This is self-sacrifice. So we have a really great show planned. We have a phenomenal panel planned for you this week, and we have lots of incredibly dystopian, depressing topics to talk about. But we have a surprise at the end because we will have the pet segment coming back, and I think we literally have like hundreds of submissions of cat and dog pictures. So, folks, we're gonna work through all of the sadness and the misery together. So, without further ado, let me bring on my panel. So, this is a veteran to the Humanist Report podcast. I brought her on possibly at least 1 billion times. Folks, it's Sarah Smith. Sarah, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'd never seen your intro for this before, and I was laughing up backstage because I loved it. It was fantastic.
It's already outdated because even the prospect of the left coming together is like laughable at this point, but I still think it's a really good jam, and Tony Tig like crushed it. So I'm glad that you like it though.
Keep the dream alive. That's what I say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, folks, the next individual that I'm bringing on, I'm not going to lie. I try to not associate with people who have better beards than me because I try to keep like the beard hegemony on the show. Like I want to make it seem as if I have the best beard in all of progressive politics. But unfortunately, that's not the case. I have found someone who has a better beard and a beard cam. Folks, we've got a doctor in the house. It's Dr. Heem Dowd. Heem, welcome. Oh, you are muted.
Oh, there I am, pro streamer here. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so hype. And yeah, I do have a beard cam, and I do have the fastest growing beard on Twitch. So some people say they have the fastest growing stream. I have the fastest growing beard. So I'm really excited.
Money, I think.
And you know what? I'm a little bit sad and disappointed that I didn't think of the beard cam myself. Like on my Twitch streams, I have the dog cam. But if I knew that like beard cam was a thing, and I just trimmed mine, so it's so beta compared to yours. I respect the beard, like absolutely.
Listen, everybody has a dog, but not everybody has a beard.
That's true. That's true. All right, folks. Well, the next person is another veteran to the Humanist Report podcast, a former and current congressional candidate who I brought on the program, basically an expert to politics. Folks, it's Donna Imam. Donna, welcome to the show again.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope today for everybody, who might not be having the greatest week, that I can bring some cheer. And, I'm always that person that's not just a glass half full, but it's like, if that glass was smaller, that would be full kind of person.
And this is why I love you so much, because at times when I'm like overly emotional, and you could tell I haven't like gone outside in weeks, like you have the perfect thing to say to bring me back to reality and help me recalibrate. So Don, I'm truly appreciative of everything that you do for the left and for me personally. So I thank you so much. Well, folks, the final panelist here is one of my favorite people on the planet. He is a fellow boutique leftist, and he's here to represent David Dole. Welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up? I don't know why I didn't get the beard intro. Come on now, look. I got a good beard.
No, you know what, David? Once you got rid of your Justin Trudeau look, that was it for you.
I had to chop the hair off. It had to go.
It looks good either way. Although on my Twitch stream, I don't remember who asked, but somebody brought up who has like the best pandemic hair, and like hands down, everyone was like David Dole. And I'm glad that like they were all focused on you, because I've been cutting my own hair since I haven't gone to a barber, and I've been trying to give myself fades, and every time there's like a fucking rat burn like on the side. It looks terrible. So I'm glad that they haven't noticed, and you've kind of taken the focus off of progressive hair, and you've kind of been the one there.
No
Listen,
problem.
you know what the good thing about giving yourself a fade is, as someone who used to do it before I went bald, if you mess it up within 3 or 4 days, it'll kind of blend itself in, and you just got to stay inside for 3 or 4 days.
That is exactly it, which is why I always cut my hair on Fridays, so that way by the time Monday comes around and I'm back on camera again, you can't even tell. And in the event, like I turn too much to the side and you see like a little bit of a bald spot, I'll just cut to B-roll.
Yeah,
put up like a picture of Bernie or something random. You won't ever be able to notice. So I'm going to bring up the comments here. So folks, I'm going to start with a topic that I think we're all thinking about. I basically got 4 hours of sleep, if I'm being charitable, because all I could think about was how distraught I was that Nina Turner lost. And, I just kind of want to open up this discussion about like, what are your general thoughts? For me, I kind of feel like this is an important moment for the left. I want us to use this, myself included, as a moment to be introspective, really look at some of our strategies, see what was working in the past and what wasn't working. And yeah, I mean, if anybody has thoughts, feel free to jump in, because this is something that I know a lot of people watching are just feeling awful about.
Can I start with the hot? Oh, go ahead.
No, please go for it. Yeah, I have a million thoughts, and I'm loud and a fast talker, so please.
Okay, I'll get you. I'll start it off. I think this is probably going to be my hottest take on this panel. I'm a progressive, full disclosure. I think that like Nina Turner is an awesome person. I always liked her rhetoric a lot, and I think that like having those kind of people in Congress or in positions of power in general is a fantastic thing to push everything a little bit to the left. As someone who lives in Canada, I have healthcare covered and many things that seem like pipe dreams in the US. And to me, that's unbelievable that this is the case. However, I wasn't as invested into the Nina Turner election, because most of the things I cover recently have been COVID related stuff. I'm super focused on debunking COVID misinformation and stuff. So the Nina Turner thing, I left it to other people. However, since I knew it was going to be a topic here, I looked into it a little bit, and there's a couple of things that didn't seem to fit the regular narrative when it comes to the establishment stomping on the progressives. So one of the things I saw was that they raised roughly the same amount of money, and I know that Chantal Brown got a massive infusion in the last few days. But I mean, hey, you could say, why didn't Nina Turner save her money for the last few days? Like it comes down to how you spent that money as well, right? Like obviously you should save some money for the last few days when you could still have effect. The other thing, and this is the most heartbreaking part, besides the fact that the Chantal Brown got endorsements from Hillary Clinton, James Clyburn, and all these other people, only 70,000 people voted in this election in a district that houses almost 700,000 people. Let's say 200,000 of those are kids and ineligible to vote. That means 500,000 people could have voted, and just only 70,000 voted. The margin of victory was 4,000 votes, I think, and the winner got I think 37,000 votes. That could literally be 37,000 diehard Hillary Clinton fans that live in Cleveland. I can see that being a possibility. So I think, yes, it's heartbreaking, but I like to look at things from like a very logical, analytical point of view and think like, okay, what actually happened here? Is it the same as other situations where the establishment steamrolls with money? Is it like some weird fishy shit going on? Or is it just the case that like we had low voter turnout, or that maybe it could be even the case that district isn't as progressive as we like to think that it is? And that's just the sad reality. Whether it's like people watching Fox News or sipping up mainstream news too much, or whatever, scared of socialism, scared of Bernie Sanders, whatever it is, sometimes I think there are some districts in the United States where they're just centrists. And this is what the kind of takeaway I had. I look forward to hearing from you guys who have been more invested into this, and maybe we can have a little bit of back and forth on this.
Yeah, no, I like that you said that, actually, because I'm very, very strong, of the belief, I should say, that we should never pretend as if we did everything right just because we want somebody to go in there guns blazing and be like hyper progressive. That doesn't necessarily mean that voters in that particular district are going to like that. So if there's ways that progressives can adapt, I think that's really important to discuss. So, I mean, one example is Adam Christensen, who ran in Florida. He was a progressive, but he knew that in his district it was more purple. And so what he tried to do was adapt. And basically, rather than pitching Medicare for all as like free healthcare for everyone, he sold it as like a small business tax cut. And so I like that you brought that up, Heem, because I think it's really important that we have these conversations. If we basically bury our heads in the sand and every single time we lose, we claim that we did nothing wrong, we will never win. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because introspection is incredibly important. And by the way, I just have to point out that the Cavernacle was joking about David Dole, saying he just got Biden elected and went to brunch. I think he's made the same joke about me as well.
Yeah.
I asked David to go to brunch. He said no, he's too busy making YouTube videos. So
Thank you.
Yeah, I honestly, like, I'm so glad that your focus is on introspection, because, like, oh my gosh, this race, like, I am deep progressive. I have a socialist fist tattoo. If you were lucky enough to be on my Twitter when the Fleets fiasco was happening, you might have caught a glimpse of my little socialist fist tattoo on my thigh. So I'm far leftist, but also, like, I think a thing people didn't realize, especially when I was running on my own campaign, is like, I am a by any means necessary shark. I think progressives, we struggle so hard with understanding that, like, you have to message to the electorate, you have to message to the district. So where someone is a progressive and they're running and they're talking about, like, they have Medicare for all on their website, when they pitch that to their purple district, they have to frame it a certain way, meaning they can't go on Twitter and be like, single payer healthcare, all this stuff, like all this, scary socialism terms. They can't do that in a purple district, because if we want power, we have to win power, and we have to message to the district in order to gain power. And while it's really nice to, like, get these blocks of progressives that are able to come in and guns blazing and be like Cory Bush and be like, we're going to fight eviction, we're going to fight this struggle, there are progressives that can't use that messaging and keep their seats. And if we want to take seats and keep seats, like, we have this vision of what we want elections to become and how we want elections to be eventually, and how we want to free up people's ability to vote better and vote more in line with their conscience in the future. But the fact is, we don't have that right now. So we can't pretend like we can play in a power structure that doesn't exist. The power structure and the power dynamic for elections and being strong in elections is what it is right now. We have to focus on seizing power. And sometimes that means helping candidates carve messaging out for progressive policies that works in their districts. Like, I love couching progressive policies in conservative language. Like, you'd be so surprised at how easy it is. But because it's conservatives, people are like, oh no, they're not a real progressive because they're using this word or that word. But the fact is, like, they have to use certain language and certain messaging tactics in order to be successful. And, like, I love that you brought up that it could be that her district might just not have been as progressive as we thought. Because, like, not every district is going to be deep blue, but you can convince people to come over to deep blue policies by using the right messaging. Like, people are naturally risk averse. They are naturally afraid of taking risks. That's why incumbent advantage is such a big deal. So when you're messaging to your voters, you have to message to your voters. You can't message to your Twitter followers. You can't message to your YouTube subscribers. You can't message to your Facebook followers. You have to message to the people who are going to vote for you in that district. Because a like and a share is great, but being screamed at by people on the left for using different language, calling it access instead of single payer because they have to, because of the district that they're in, like, that's not useful. Like, you're just yelling at them online. They're not messaging to you. They're messaging to the people that they're going to be voting for them. And, like, part of me wonders if maybe you're right, if maybe like we underthought how far left the district is, but also like that mass influx of cash at the end, like by the time like those ads had gone around the world twice by the time Nina got her shoes on, and she was already being slammed. I think it was Jordan Sheraton was tweeting about how like the TV was rife with these ads and these billboards, and like it was rough. The influx of cash was a big deal, but also like as progressives, we got to be introspective. Like when we use our messaging, are we messaging to the online left, or are we messaging to the people who are actually going to get us elected?
I think you're right, Sarah, about messaging. The issue with Nina Turner, though, is that she was already a known quantity, and there's 4 years of her on camera saying she supports Medicare for all, supports all these Bernie Sanders. I mean, she's a big Bernie Sanders backer, right? So I think it's harder for someone like her who's already a known quantity to change her messaging. But they were even running. I mean, they were running ads against her that made it sound like she was more conservative than she actually was, like saying that she was against raising the minimum wage, that she was against universal health care, that she was against immigration reform. So they realize that these are popular policies in that district. So we have to pretend she's actually conservative when it comes to at least these issues. And also, I think the big issue in terms of this race was the fact that her comments about Biden. I mean, she's correct to point out that voting for Biden versus voting for Trump is like eating, half a bowl of shit versus eating a full bowl of shit. I agree. That's correct. But is that the best?
Maybe the framing could have been.
Yeah, exactly.
If
she knew she was going to run in a race in the future, then you have to be a little more aware that, especially if it's a district that is a little more centrist, that you have to be a little more aware of your language before you go on that run. Now, it's possible she had no idea she was going to run for Congress and didn't even think about this. She's a very honest, open person, so she never really brought her language down in any of these appearances. But at the same time, that came back to bite her, I think. I mean, they ran that again and again, apparently, on television and radio ads, and I think that hurt her. But at the same time, I mean, we can't ignore all the money poured into this race that was just attacking Nina Turner. And I do agree, though. I think they could have spent Nina's campaign probably could have saved a little money till the end, spent it a little better. I think they underestimated the power of Chantel Brown, or not really her power, but the power of the money behind her. And we're, I think, caught off guard at the end with the amount of attack ads that were coming out and the amount of support that came out for Chantel Brown. And, once Clyburn got into it, I think that, really got the wheels in motion and brought all this money in that really eventually, I mean, it was a close race. Nina, I think, still could have won if that campaign had done the right things. But there was so much money poured into the race against her that it was really almost an uphill battle by the end of it.
Yeah. And to speak to both of your points about the pro-Democrat basically sentiment in this district. So I believe it was Jordan Sheridan who tweeted about how if you drive through portions of Ohio, you see that comment, voting for Biden is like a half-eaten bowl of shit on billboards, and they really use this against her. And so to Sarah's comment about the online left and how you really have to kind of ignore the noise and focus on your voters, there's an area or a portion of her race that was really frustrating to me. And it was when she tweeted out a quote of Barack Obama, and she, attributed it to Barack Obama. And on the left, it's obvious there's issues with that. Barack Obama there's a lot of problems with that. Like, this is not the progressive that, anyone thought he was. But, a lot of people on the online left suspected that was like evidence that she sold out, when in actuality, I think that was her trying to drive a point home to people in this district that she's not like this Democratic Party hater. She has respect for figures in the Democratic Party, but she sees that there are issues with it. And so this is why I do think introspection is really important, because I think that we've kind of we've overemphasized how influential the online left will be, and it can be great. Like coming on shows when you first start out to get a little bit of a boost in campaign money is super, super important and crucial. But people at the end of the day have to really build up a connection with their own constituents. And that's why I wanted to go to Donna Iman, because you were running in this red district that was on the cusp of flipping. You made it to the runoff in Texas. and ultimately you didn't win. But I think that your insight, into what needs to be done to reach out to people who aren't necessarily receptive to the left-wing message is crucial. So what are your thoughts on this, Donna?
So, I have a little bit of an insider perspective, right? So I ran a race, and my race had 12 people in the race and 6 people on the ballot. So I was a first-time candidate with no political background, so I knew it was a big uphill battle. And there's 2 big things if you're running a race that you have to focus on. One is making sure people know who you are, increasing your name ID. And then the next thing is, getting your message, communicating your message to your voters. And that hurdle is all about money, because if you don't have money, then you can't get your message to voters. But there's a third part, and this part is really important. The message that you bring to your voters has to be a message that not just people like or resonate with it, but it motivates them to say, I'm going to go out and vote for Donna Iman because there's something in this candidate for me. She's going to do things that are going to change my life for better in some way, shape, or form, right? So these are the 3 things from inside a campaign that you're trying to accomplish as a candidate. So I have the fortune of, winning the primary, with a 13-point lead. And then, of course, losing the general, which everybody in Texas, unfortunately, lost in 2020 because Trump was just able to bring out so many more of his followers. But from the winning side, I'll tell you this, that in a primary, you already have very low voter turnout. So if you look at our voter turnout in the primary, we increased it by more than double, like 2.5 times. But even then, the number of people that came out in our primary was somewhere around the number of people that came out in Ohio 11's Democratic special primary. So this is not just a primary, this is a special primary. So just do the math in your head. In a March 3rd primary in Austin, Texas area, we're talking about Super Tuesday. So this is not where we're doing down ballot only. This is presidential election at the top of the ballot. And the number of people who turned out for the Democratic primary is about the same number of people that turned out in the Ohio 11 Democratic primary special. So actually, they got pretty decent turnout. So everybody knows that in a special election, the turnout is even worse. So the one thing that you have to do in a primary is you want to bring out the folks that support you the most. And I want to tell just a little story here. In the runoff where we won by 13 points, because remember, when we ran the primary in Texas, if you get the most number of votes, you don't win. You have to get over 50%. So first, we made it to the runoff. We came in actually second. And when we were in the runoff, we not only won by 13 points, but the number of votes that our campaign got in the runoff was about the same number of votes that we got on Super Tuesday. Now, that is unbelievable because a lot fewer people came out to vote, right? So we had to accelerate the number of people who came out. And you have to find those people that are really motivated to come out and vote for Donna. So that was our whole message. And we targeted the folks that we could bring out. And the little story that I want to tell you is this. One of my volunteer phone bankers called somebody and they was like, are you going to come out and vote for Donna? And they're like, yeah, I voted for Donna in the primary. And of course, I want her to win. I love her platform. I love her. And it's like, do you have a plan to come vote? And this was, remember, July 14th, 2020. This was in the middle of the pandemic. Texas was partially shut down. And he said, I wasn't planning to go vote. And the volunteer person on the phone goes, hey, we need you to come out and vote. Like, do you really need me to come out and vote for Donna? It's like, we need every single vote. You have no idea. Low voter turnout. We communicated this message over and over again to our supporters. And you know what that guy said? He said, I haven't been out of the house for 3 months since, March 6th when the shutdown happened. But if you guys really need my vote, this will be the first time I go out of my house. I get my groceries delivered and I get my food at my door. I will go out and vote for Donna. So this is the kind of message that you have to really get your supporters out. And this is the tough part about special elections. They're really easy to lose if you don't get your biggest supporters out.
Can I ask you a question? Why is it that special elections have such low voter turnout, especially if this is like this was like a national, nationally headlined election? It was the only one on its day, first one since Biden. All these things that made it a unique. Nina Turner, like David said, is one of the household names in progressive politics. We've all been knowing. So I don't know why the assumption is that a special primary would always have lower voter turnout than a regular primary.
Yeah.
You know why that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about March 3rd, if you turned on the news, if you turned on just, local network TV, you would see ads telling you to come out and vote in the primary. Like the Democratic Party actually ran ads.
This year, March 3rd?
No, I'm talking about, when we had the big primary for the Democratic presidential election, right?
Okay.
Super Tuesday, right? That's the biggest. That's the biggest day where multiple states across this country all come out to vote for the president, right?
Of course.
Now, for many of us online who follow Democratic primaries, it seems like we're hearing about this race all the time. But the average voter is not tuned in to special elections. In fact, I can bet you that if you stood outside a grocery store in Ohio's 11th and you asked 100 people if they knew there was a special election going on, you'd be lucky. You'd be lucky to find 25 people, I think, that would even know there's a special election going on. Some of us who love politics and follow politics are following this stuff around, but the average voter, even not in a special election, I'm talking about Democratic primaries. Look at the Democratic primaries across this country. If you look at the data, you'll see it's less than 25% turnout.
For sure, yeah, but it seemed like you were making the case that, like, if you're comparing like regular congressional race compared to a special election, that the special election would have even lower voter turnout than a regular.
That's correct. That's correct, because the special election is not talked about. It might be talked about in the evening news, but you're not getting as much bombardment. It's just one race. Whereas if you have multiple races on the ballot, more people are communicating to you about it.
Can I push back a little bit more? I'm sorry. I love to push back on people. So I would say, wouldn't that make it easier for Nina Turner? Because Nina Turner isn't going to get that mainstream media attention anyways. So this would make the mainstream attention go down, and it would give Nina Turner a better chance, or any progressive a better chance to.
Yes, that is a great question. And you are right that so I'm not going to talk about specifically about Ohio 11, but it is easier to win primaries. And this is why, left groups like Justice Democrats focus on blue districts, and they focus only on primaries, because you have to spend so much less. You have less than 100,000 people that will come out in a primary. If you look at the original primary in New York 14, for example, you will see less than 50,000 people, probably even less than 40,000 people came out to vote for that. We had a special election here in Texas 06. Less than 40,000 people came out to vote in that special election, right? That is why people target primaries. You're absolutely correct. Now, is it easier to win? Not necessarily, because there's always the factor of persuasion. You still have to persuade your voters, your fans, to come out, and you don't necessarily know who they are. They don't come out and say, "I voted for Donna. Yeah. I'm a Donna voter." You know?
Yeah. But I mean, I guess I would say that's even more of a reason why, like, something like saying Joe Biden is a half a shit sandwich or something is basically like stabbing yourself in the heart. Like, why would you, or like, if she says that, she should maybe just like skip this election. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're just putting out opponents to attack you, you can't then be surprised that they attacked you on it.
Well, I think that, to be fair, so she did say this before the actual election between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, before she would have known that like Marcia Fudge would have been appointed. But I think that honestly, like, even though that was really the biggest thing that was weaponized against her, they would have used something else to try to prove to voters in that district that she's not sufficiently loyal to the Democratic Party. And another thing that they tried to, push is that, well, that there's evidence that she didn't even vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016 and that she voted for Jill. So I think that ultimately at the end of the day, they would have found something, because at the end of the day, this district is very, very like pro-Democrat. I think it's like a D plus 30 something. So they already already knew, like the attacks on her was predetermined. Although I will say that's not to detract from how devastating that particular comment was, to your point, Him, because it absolutely, like, for voters in this district, they see that as an attack on Joe Biden, who just delivered us a victory, who saved us from Donald Trump. So they don't view her as like an ally. And so when you have that in conjunction with these like mailers that DMFI sent out saying that, or suggesting that she doesn't support Medicare for all or a $15 an hour minimum wage, if you don't necessarily know very much about these candidates, because not everyone is as terminally online as like us, then
you go for the sound bites. You go for the sound bites and the endorsements.
What's amazing though, like
it.
Chantel Brown was backed by literal Republicans, like Republican support, like Trump supporters, like that poured money into her campaign. Like if there's one thing that Nina's campaign should have hit on again and again, it was that. Like they should have just hammered home. This is not a real. This is she's backed by Republicans, backed by big oil, backed by Fox News donors as well. Like she could have. I think that should have been the focus. If they're gonna say that she's a fake Democrat, then say that Chantel Brown's a Republican. I mean, that's the kind of angle you have.
And honestly, like, this kind of comes back to like a little bit about what I was talking about when it comes to like messaging and messaging to your district and messaging to the voters and things like that. Like part of what you have to do is like when she knew she was going to run, or when she'd made the decision to run, like what I would have recommended as and Donna, you probably had people talking about this too. You got to figure out the spin, right? You got to figure out the spin. She's got to have known. And like, I think this was her weak point. She has to have known that comment was going to come back, and there was no spin. Like she should have said like, yeah, when speaking candidly, that's what I was talking about, because, really what it comes down to is like voting between these two in the perception of a lot of people's eyes is it's about harm reduction more than about supporting one person more than another, or like more than, she could have explained it away any number of ways and like brushed it off and been like, I was talking about harm reduction in a really candid way with voters, but she just like ignored it, and like it came back to bite her. And when you make these comments, like you have to assess controversial things that you've said. Like when I'm working with candidates, I'm like, what's in your closet? What have you said online? What? Just write it all down. No judgment. Let's talk about how we can explain this to people in a way that's more relatable than like, oh my God, she called him half his shit sandwich. It's much easier to be like, well, yeah, she did, but she was talking about in the sense of harm reduction for like societal contract harm reduction, like making sure less people were like experiencing harm at the hands of like a harmful, of a hurtful president. And like that could have been spun any number of ways. And I think that like one of the weak points of Nina's campaign is that they never confronted it head on like that. And they really should have. Like shying away makes people feel like you're hiding something. Like it's always better to just own something and be upfront about it and just address it head on. Because like the more you try to avoid it or hope it goes away, the less likely it's going to go away, even with messaging and especially in politics.
Well, the other thing, is it true? And again, you guys, you all know more about this than this race than I do. Is it true that Nina Turner said she doesn't want to do negative ads or something like this? She doesn't.
I think so. Yeah, she didn't go
like
negative.
This, in my opinion, is naivete. Like you're playing politics, one of the dirtiest games. You're supposed to club people in the back of their knee when they're not looking. Don't be nice.
It depends on how. Like it depends on how. Because like when I was running, I didn't really. I don't like going negative.
Did your opponent go negative at you? Because it can be a fair race between two, right?
To be fair, I was a young woman running against an old white man, so it's in a predominantly district full of like predominantly people of color in my district. So like him attacking a young woman would have been really terrible optics.
Yeah.
Was this a congressional race, Sarah?
The Washington's 9th. So the 9th congressional district.
It was a congressional race, right?
Yeah, it was congressional for me too. And so like when we're talking about like this kind of messaging, like she didn't go negative until like I think someone said like a month or two before the special election date, but Chantel had already, it was too late. She was running those ads on loops. Those billboards were already up and going. So like, I think like it sucks and you don't want to go negative, but like, if they're going to come at you, you got to do something.
Yeah.
One thing about negative advertising, I just wanted to chime in here because I'm of the opinion that negative advertising doesn't really help, especially when you're trying to run in a primary among Democrats. Remember, you're trying to persuade Democrats to vote for one Democrat over the other Democrat, right? It's a Democratic primary. But the second thing is this, right? Let's say, for example, you're going to go out and you're going to vote for Donna, or you're going to go out and vote for candidate A, right? And if you see negative advertising against candidate A, right? The thing is, all that the question is, will that negative advertising, knowing, especially primary voters are quite actually, they know exactly what's going on, right? So they're actually quite well informed. They're not low information voters. General voters tend to be low information voters. They tend to know the top of the ticket, but not down ballot. So when you see something negative, you know this is politics, right? So you might take it with, you will take it with a grain of salt. The question is, are you motivated to go out and vote? And in most cases, the whole point of negative advertising is to make sure that the person that's going to come out and vote stays at home, right? That they're so discarded that they stay at home. So I completely agree with Sarah that I think negative advertising is not effective. And I want to say one thing here. You know, in a congressional race with less than 100,000 people coming out, and in a primary, most primaries have even less than that, right? Less than 75,000 people coming out. Once you have a certain amount of money, I'll give you just a simple, a number here. For every dollar, you can communicate to every voter one time. So if you have $100,000, okay, you can communicate to 100,000 people one time easily. If you have $1 million, you can communicate to 10 times. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to see your communication all 10 times. You're hoping they see it once or twice or 3 times, and they're like, oh, I like this message, I'm going to go vote for this person. But when you have a certain amount of money, you're at a point of diminishing returns. So you can have all this money and you can run ads, 4 or 5, in a row, which is what happened in Ohio's 11th, is my understanding from people in the district. But at some point you get diminishing rate of returns. And in terms of persuasion, I'll tell you this, you can't persuade people on the day before they go out to vote. And I'm telling you this from a candidate that really fought hard to win the nomination, but then lost. Persuasion has to start early. Early voting in this race started, 2-3 weeks ago? You have to have already persuaded people. So a lot of times, in big races like this, people want to come in from the outside. People are like, we want to poll work. We want to go canvass on the last day. On the last day, on the last week, 2 weeks before the election, if it's too late, guys, believe it or not, you have to start persuasion 3 months, ideally 4 months ahead. And this is what a lot of people don't understand when they donate. They're like, oh, I'll donate whenever. And a lot of people, by the way, they donate at the last minute. They'll give you these big checks, the day before, a week before, seven days before. And I always tell donors, that money is literally useless. You can run TV ads with that, but with TV ads, all you do is increase name recognition. You cannot persuade. If you want to persuade, you have to start early. And early money, you have no idea. It's like gold. It has 3, 5 times, 10 times the effect of late money.
And that also goes to the importance of early endorsements as well, right? I mean, if you're running in a race, you want, say, if Bernie Sanders is going to back you, you want him to back you when you launch your campaign, I imagine, to get all that money start rolling in, as opposed to, backing you a month beforehand. And same with AOC and the other big names. I'm sure, though I think Bernie did back Nina early as well as AOC, but I know there were some late endorsements that I imagine may have helped Nina more if they came a little earlier.
Can I just ask a couple of things? 2 things. So these people, and you guys know Donna and Sarah, you hire like advertising agencies to help you, right?
You can. So there's some people do like political advertising. You usually like shoot an ad and then you buy ad time. So you usually have like someone come in to just film your ad. You're hiring like an AV team.
Okay. I just saying like I feel like nobody would run negative ads if they weren't effective. Like they must be effective if they're run, right?
And it also depends on the kind of negative ad. And that was like my half baked thought earlier. So like when I would go negative, it's not that I would attack the person, it's that I attack the policy. So he had a policy track record, so I'd attack the policy track record. And like it depends on how you go negative, and like it is effective to the degree that like because people are naturally risk averse and because voters are naturally risk averse, when you lean into like Nina actually like doesn't really support this, she just says she does, like it's enough of a boogeyman most of the time for people to be like, oh my gosh. And then if they don't see any kind of like combative comeback ad of like Nina Turner walking slowly through a crowd of people, shaking hands, kissing babies, look how amazing she is, she loves Medicare for all, actually they were lying to you. If there's no counter to that, all they have is that like fear response, and that's the only thing they remember when they go to fill out their ballot. So it is like they are and aren't effective in the diminishing return sense, like Donna said.
And then the
I
other
have
thing,
to say, I would love to answer this for
go ahead.
you. So I vehemently disagree that negative advertising works at all, and here's why. And so it's a really great question to ask, like, why do people do it, right? So there was a big study done by 3 universities about advertising in general. Does advertising really work, right? And after spending millions of dollars trying to figure out if you run TV ads, if you run magazine ads, what work, they found absolutely there was no way to know if your advertising produced sales, because most people will advertise before Christmas, during Valentine's Day, et cetera, and they could never correlate if advertising on TV, specifically on TV, worked. So that was a big study. But here's the incentive for running negative advertising. When you have millions of dollars, by the way, to run a congressional campaign, you need very little money to effectively communicate by mail or even by digital. Digital is literally very, very, very inexpensive. Okay, what is the biggest expense in a campaign of any kind? Is TV advertising. So when you buy TV advertising ads, most congressional campaigns go through a media company. That media company takes 15% off the top, period, of every single dollar you spend. So if you spend $1 million, they get 15% of that. But guess what? If you spend $2 million, they get another 15% of that extra million that you just spent, and so on and so forth. So if you have millions of dollars, you literally cannot spend it on digital or mail or anything else unless you are hiring many people. And the fact is that most, consultants will tell you to run TV ads and run negative ads because they stand to benefit from it. They get a nice big cut. Okay. So bottom line is,
would you say the same thing about general products?
Well, I just gave you the study on general products.
Oh, okay.
I know.
I feel like I've never heard this before. That advertisement doesn't work. It's
no, it's not that it doesn't work. I'm just saying that you can't directly correlate it to sales. So you can't directly say that negative advertising works, and that's why people do it. The point is, people don't do something because it works. We assume that people do something because it works. Does that make sense? Yeah, I just want to shout out to Walker on here because he said he volunteered for me. I love you, Walker. Thank you for volunteering for me.
There we
go.
Donna,
I love that. That's really awesome. And I think about like how myself when it comes to advertisements, and every time I hear like an ad interrupting Hulu, I'm like, I'm 10 times less likely to buy your service because you interrupted my TV show. So like, how many people are like me with like politics? And it's kind of terrifying, right? Like, I don't want to think about it. It's stressing me out.
Yeah. So I wanted to jump in about Heem's question about negative political ads. Because now this story that I'm going to cite, or the study I'm going to cite, is a little bit dated. I think it's from 2011. So there's been studies on this about what types of ads that are negative ads are the most effective. And so basically, the general rule of thumb is you want to avoid negative ads if you're ahead. Because negative ads, they actually turn people off to the candidate who's pushing the negative ad. But simultaneously, they'll bring down the person who's ahead. So if you're like 20 points behind and you do a bunch of negative ads, that will change the perception of you in that district negatively, but also bring down the amount of support for that front runner. So there's also really interesting ways that you can do negative ads. So like Sarah referenced like policy ads, but people get even more turned off when the attacks are personal and you focus on like really not necessarily ad hominem attacks, but like family related issues like, oh, well, this person gave their son money. It's a bad example, but people are so sensitive that even if you zoom in really close to a candidate's face, that can trigger a really negative psychological response to where they dislike that candidate even more. So I know that the consultants, like they all know this, and I know that they're not going to go negative until the last minute, because the minute that they do that, it will bring down the perception of Nina Turner. I think that the issue with this race is that it was all a little bit too late. Like she was riding high and she had that 35-point lead. And then within the last couple of weeks, that's when it really changed pretty quickly. So by the time they actually went negative, which is when I think they needed to, then it might have been a little bit too late, in my opinion.
And by the way, every time you run a negative ad against your opponent, you're increasing their name ID. You are giving, it might be negative, but you're saying their name over and over again on TV.
So then should we not come? So then we can't complain about Nina Turner getting negative ads then, because then it increased her name as well, right? You can't have it both ways, where like it's either one or the other. It either helps.
The difference is she was already more, I think, a
She
known
was ahead.
quantity.
Okay.
Like whereas I think this is the kind of the place that the Turner campaign was stuck in, where Chantal Brown wasn't as prominent yet in the race at the time because Nina was so far ahead that if they started attacking her closest competitor, who was maybe at 15-20% compared to Nina at like 40%, then they may be increasing her Chantal Brown's recognition, and it may actually come back to hurt her. The other issue with negative ads is Chantal Brown, because she had all this outside spending that they were the ones doing the attack ads. There was never the tag at the end saying, this is a whatever approved by Chantal Brown. Whereas Nina Turner's ads, they were negative against Chantal Brown, and then Nina Turner saying, I approve this message. So I think it almost, in a way, that could also hurt her, being like, hey, Nina Turner is the one doing this attack, whereas a Chantal Brown or a attack on Nina Turner. Yeah, it's like, who's doing this attack? Who knows? But Nina Turner sucks. Like, you know what I mean? They can play that.
If I had to guess, like, one thing I will say is that I bet you it wasn't the negative ads. I bet you they actually spent money to bring out people who would vote for the person who would win. Text messaging, phone, dialing them. Those have huge impact, by the way. And we only see what's on TV. You're not seeing that private call between one person and another person where they're persuading them to come out and vote too. So there was definitely that happened.
Can I also say one more thing? Sure. Earlier, Donna, you said that the persuasion needs to happen like weeks in advance, right? But I think if anything, this Nina Turner race is an example of where people are constantly changing their mind, because Nina Turner had a massive lead and then it just shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. And like I
disagree. That's not true. If you look at the data, that's not what happened. In the early voting, she was behind by 13 points when the early voting results came out. Online it showed it was 1%, but that was all of early voting.
At no point she was the heavy favorite.
She became the favorite after election day voting data started dropping, which would imply the data would imply. I know people want to believe a lot of stuff, but the data would imply.
I just looked at the polling.
The polling was absolutely wrong. So I'm a big disbeliever in polling. I'm the only person who ran a congressional campaign and won the nomination with zero polling, by the way, I think, out there. But bottom line is the polling was completely off. And if you look at the data, early voting data, Nina was behind. She was in fact behind by 13 points, and she kept making that up.
When you're saying data, what do you mean when you say early data? If it's not polls?
So all the early voting.
Yeah, go ahead.
So all the early voting, the first, I don't know how many weeks of early voting Ohio 11 had. It was maybe 2 or 3 weeks. All of that is dropped as soon as the polls close. So the first data that you see, the 28,000 votes that were dumped, that was all early voting data, right? And then they continued to drop early voting data because they've had that for 3 days. Remember, voting probably ended, I don't know, Saturday or Sunday. I'm not sure in Ohio 11 exactly when it ended. So they had all of Monday to get all of the early voting data ready. It was ready to go. So when polls close, early voting data is ready to drop. The rest of the data that comes is election day voting. So it comes from precinct by precinct by precinct. That's what I mean.
Okay.
Yeah. So I want to jump in right here and just kind of one by one, ask if you all have any like closing thoughts on this, and particularly like to viewers, because I know that whenever we have one of these losses, which we all expect, they're an inevitability. But I mean, there's always this instinct, I think, in a lot of people, myself included, to kind of just check out and like try to do something different, because electoral politics is really difficult when we are kind of like perpetually the underdogs in a lot of these races where, we're outspent and the Democratic Party establishment brings out like the big names to endorse against. Rather than checking out, like, what would you say to folks instead of checking out? Like, how would you think they can most effectively direct the energy that's currently there? We'll start with Sarah.
Oh, I love that you asked this. Oh my gosh. So I could like talk about how like there are certain folks that capitalize on the outrage fatigue cycle because it keeps you for like, don't go out doing stuff, like stay here and be outraged with us and fatigue, keep clicking this. And they don't want you to know that like there are options to go out and do things that are actually regenerative and rejuvenating and restorative about your faith in democracy. So like try and break out of your outrage cycle. And it's one of the hardest things to do. But like after these big losses suck. They suck and they hurt and they suck and they sing and they suck. But like put yourself into something where you have more power. So like really focus on your power. Look up local elections. Like go get started, volunteer for the general in a city council race or a county council race or a state legislative district race. Go put your energy into like a candidate that you want to unseat someone bad or a candidate that you like more than another. Like that local stuff has more of an impact. Like federal is really important, but the shit that actually, I don't know if I can swear. Can I swear? I don't care.
It's encouraged actually.
I was gonna ask that earlier too, and I forgot. And then I'm like, oh.
You're obligated to say at least 2 F-bombs throughout the duration.
Mike,
of the
show. Mike, in your invites, you should tell people this in the future. By the way, it would help.
I will. There's been a lot of
I assumed, but like, yeah, and like this shit really sucks. But like, just go. The shit that matters is your local elections. Like federal is great and flashy, but oh my God, it moves at the pace of molasses coursing through the sands of time. Like the shit that actually gets done where you can make real change is state and local elections. So like, don't feel discouraged. Just say, oh, okay, well, next, that sucks, but the real change is made here because you're going to be more energized. You're more likely to be victorious. You're more likely to find progressives. You're more likely to find people that align with your values. And then you can actually put them in a seat of actual power in your daily life. So like, obviously I'm huge on self-care. Give yourself a couple weeks to like mourn, let yourself go through the grieving process, but jump into a local race. You'd be shocked how many more connections you make, how much more fun it is. And it makes way more change than federal does any given day.
Yeah. David.
I would just say, look at just base level, look at victories that have happened. I mean, look at someone like Cori Bush, who in 2018 lost to Lacey Clay and then comes back, 2 years later and beats him. And, understand that we have to go through these really shitty times, these losses, to really appreciate the victories. And I think if you look around, understand that, like, look at, there were no progressives in Congress before 2016. I mean, I'm sure there were a few, but it was they weren't really there. And then now there's a big voice. Like there's constant discussions about Medicare for all, raising wages. You see the power that someone like Cori Bush can have by protesting in front of the Capitol building and then forcing Biden to extend the eviction ban. So understand that, these moments really suck. They're horrible. And yes, I go through times where I'm like, why am I covering this? I'm in Canada. I could be covering, anything else. Like I could be happy every day. But understand that like victories happen and these losses are going to happen. And we have to learn from them. And also it's important. And I have to also realize this as well, that it's really easy to blame everything else. It's really easy to blame big money, as I did in most of my video on this campaign. But understand that there are lessons here. There are mistakes that the Nina Turner campaign made. And there are always mistakes in these sorts of losses that we can learn from and grow.
Yeah. And Dr. Heem.
Okay, let me try to say this in the best way possible. So I got into politics. Big Bernie Sanders supporter, big progressive. I still consider myself an extremely progressive person, social issues, economic issues, whatever. But as I get more into politics, I realize the value in things like incrementalism, in things like just being able to get past what you can get past. If Joe Manchin doesn't want to vote for a $15 minimum wage, pass a $12 minimum wage, pass a $10 minimum wage. Just keep the ball moving forward. And I think progressives need to do a better job at hiding their power levels. We see sometimes where progressives win elections and then become centrist afterwards. We should do the reverse. Go in as a centrist candidate, say, I'm not for Medicare for all. Maybe public option, who knows, whatever. And then once you get elected, show your power levels. And I think that's actually some good advice. There's no reason for you to come out and be like, $15 minimum wage isn't enough. We should have $25 minimum wage. You're never going to win like that. And I like winning elections because you can actually get shit done when you win elections. So I think that like we should embrace incrementalism a little bit more, and hate to say it, a little bit of centrism and like a little bit of analytical analysis on these kind of things, and realizing that every race is not the same. You can't compare one race to another. The demographics are different. The times are different. So many things are different between these races, and you should just look at the race itself. And in this Nina Turner case is one example where I think a lot of mistakes were made, and it doesn't seem like money was a big factor. It wasn't like Chantel Brown raised 10 times more money. And in closing, I want to say sorry if I was had too many hot takes on this issue. I'm sure we'll agree on the next issues.
This was a good convo.
I like
I
your
have to
takes.
boot you for
Any
saying
means necessary.
centrism. I got
No, I didn't say be a centrist. I said embrace the kind of
Fake it.
aesthetic.
Just
Yeah,
fake it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, Heem, I'm glad that you said that.
Game.
I'm glad that you said that because I actually had this weird thought. I'm like, what if somebody like ran as a Republican and they were like super like CRT is communism, and then they got in and immediately like embraced the national health system and went full communist? That would be the most funny, like amazing thing ever. Like,
take all their money, take the big donor money, pretend you're a centrist, and then at the end just flip. Yeah,
exactly.
It's the by any means necessary method. Like, say what you got to say to get elected. Like, you guys, we got to abandon this concept of like be pure in everything you do. They're not pure with us. We don't need to be pure with them. Say what you got to say to get elected, and then do what you got to do to be progressive.
Exactly.
Get the power. You got to have power to use power.
It's like I see some people shitting on AOC and stuff now, and it's like ridiculous to me. Like, she's got to get things done. She's not just there to be like a puppet for progressive movement. She's there to actually try to pass legislation, have a future in the Democratic Party, and these things are so important. And it bothers me that sometimes progressives undervalue the importance of these kind of tactics.
Yeah, I mean, it's about, you know, recalibrating once in a while and trying to make sure that we're not purifying ourselves into oblivion, if I can quote. I think it was Ben Dixon who said that. Yeah, you know, and just to add to your point, Heem, I don't disagree with you about like embracing incrementalism sometimes. That doesn't necessarily mean that you fold immediately, right? That doesn't mean that you go in there and you announce to everyone, hey, folks, I just want to let you know I support a $15 an hour minimum wage, but I'm definitely going to cave to 10. I think it just is a matter of like trying to do what we can in this terrible late stage capitalist society to make any progress that we possibly can. So I think that the nuance is really important because even myself, like I get a little bit too fired up, and I even find myself like looking at candidates, looking for things
in an emotional way, kind of.
In an emotional way, exactly. And it's like you kind of like, I think that we're all human beings. So oftentimes we have to really recalibrate and remind ourselves, listen, this is a really long game. Electoral politics is hard. Not everyone is perfect. I don't have to have a candidate that checks every single box, but so long as I think they're going to get in there and fight and be progressive, then really that's all that I could hope for. It's a tough battle. And we'll go to Donna with some basically words of encouragement, I guess, for the people who are disillusioned and they just want to freak out.
Hey, if you're disillusioned, I have really, really amazing news for you. Here's the data, and it will blow your socks off. The data is all on our side. Single payer healthcare is going to lower the cost of healthcare for every single person in this country. And I know you guys know this, so I'm going to end this with an anecdote. I live in Northwest Austin, and my district is gerrymandered, goes all the way up to one of the largest military base in the United States. So I went to many veterans meetings. And when you walk into a veterans meeting, this is not a Democratic meeting. This is not a Republican meeting. It's a mix. And you're out there just telling about yourself. The very first time I met this gentleman who was extreme right wing, he came up to me at the end of the meeting and he said, I am going to do everything in my power to make sure you do not win. Funny enough, I went to many, veterans events, and I explained single payer healthcare over and over again. Remember, these are to most people who have already healthcare, right? They have the VA system. But the third time I met that gentleman, he came up to me and he said, I want to talk to you. And I told one of my volunteer friends that was with me, I said, hey, can you talk to him? Because I'm not going to win his vote. He just wants to, harass me here. And he told that guy, he said, I know Donna doesn't want to talk to me, but I really want to talk to her. And so after everybody left, because, I would stand around and talk to everybody, he was still there. And I was dreading it. I was like, oh my God, I have to go talk to this guy. And he came up to me and he says, so you mean, and then he explains Medicare for all to me in detail, back to me. And he says, you mean this is what you're proposing? And I said, yes, that's exactly what I'm proposing. And he ended the conversation with, I can get on board with that.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That's great. That's like the perfect story to end this whole thing with.
True.
Not the whole show, but like this segment.
All right, goodbye, everyone. Take care.
I'm like, don't leave yet. Oh my god, no, because that's
drop the mic.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like sometimes, you know, we have to like step back and acknowledge that we're dealing with human beings, and there's no perfect answer really. So everything that we're talking about here, we can cite studies and data, but a lot of it at the end of the day is it's tough because it is human beings. And one thing that I've seen that's probably the most common in terms, and I guess this is my words of encouragement, not that I have much because I'm in doomer mode right now, but my one thing that I would say is a lot of people feel like, okay, Nina Turner losing, this just further solidifies this idea that there's going to be no progress within the Democratic Party. And to that I say, I hear you. I have been one of the loudest people, I think, on the left fighting for a third party and a fourth party. But the problem is that you can't just start with having a third party because we already have hundreds of third parties, literally hundreds that exist. And if we want to actually do that, there is really great legislation that will change electoral politics in America, get us electoral reform. So right now, we all elect one person. We have a district magnitude of 1 in the United States, 1 representative. But if we can increase that to 2 to 3, change our districts so gerrymandering is no longer a thing, move to proportional representation, this is specifically how you actually get more parties. So if you truly feel like the Democratic Party is just like a dead end for movements, I mean, for me, I feel like, sure, I would love to have third parties. I think capitalism ultimately is going to corrupt any party that you bring in. But if you want third parties, I'm with you, and I think it's a really important cause. HR 4000 is one of the most important pieces of legislation because this would actually facilitate electoral reform that would make it so that way there isn't just 2 dominant parties. And electoral reform is difficult, right? But anytime there's a town hall, I speak to one of the individuals who are closest to me. I feel like I have 2 representatives because I'm like on the border of a district. And one of them embraced HR 4000 and co-sponsored it. Another did not. And it hasn't been reintroduced. This is bill or legislation by Don Byers Jr. And what I will say is that if you truly, genuinely feel like you're done with the Democratic Party and you don't want to support any Democrats in the future because you don't think any progress can be made, fairvote.org. HR 4000, these are things that you can do that will actually facilitate multiple parties winning. Now, it's hard because countries like New Zealand and Japan have actually done electoral reform. They pass laws expanding the amount of parties that they have, and it doesn't always take effect. Like in Japan, for example, they've had a one-party system, and basically there's just like a lot of factions in Japan. And so they finally got, electoral reform, and then they had a different party win for the first time in, I think, decades. But guess what? The next election cycle, everything kind of went back to the way it was. Electoral reform is one of the most complicated things ever. But what I will say, and just to kind of not, because I already know I'm rambling, in order to get multiple parties, we have to defeat Duverger's law. Duverger's law is not an actual law. You're not going to find it on the books. But what this law is it posits that any system where it's majoritarian, first past the post, winner take all, you're always going to have 2 systems, and more insufferable enough. These parties are, or 2 parties, excuse me, and more insufferable than that is that these parties are almost always going to be centrist. They're going to stick as close to the center as they can possibly be. And sometimes it gets even worse than that because the center gets skewed to the right, as is the case in the United States. So a lot needs to happen. But if you truly want to change the system and get more parties, direct it into an actual piece of legislation by Don Byers Jr., who's great at this, who can affect change. But folks, what we are going to do now is move on to the next story. If you're feeling a little bit inspirational after hearing from everybody with their closing thoughts, let's temper that, because I wanted to bring in a doomer story about the United States. So there is a new report by the Commonwealth Fund, and what they find is that the United States of America ranks dead last in both healthcare outcomes and overall spending when it comes to healthcare in the United States of America. Now, what they say here is that there's a couple of reasons why some systems, healthcare systems, perform better than ours. So they provide universal coverage. and remove most cost barriers. They invest in primary care systems to ensure that high-value services are equitably available in all communities to all people. They reduce administrative burdens that divert time, efforts, and spending from health improvement efforts, and they invest in social services, especially for children and working-age adults. Now, I just want to read a couple of paragraphs from this story because I think that most of us on the panel already know the fundamentals about American healthcare and how broken it is. But this is from Jake Johnson of Common Dreams, who's brilliant, by the way. So basically, using a range of criteria to evaluate the healthcare systems of 11 countries, Australia, Canada, France, Germany, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, and United Kingdom, and the United States, the Commonwealth Fund's latest analysis shows that the U.S. once again ranks last on access to care, administrative efficiency, equity, and care and healthcare outcomes. The lone bright spot for the for-profit U.S. healthcare system, there is a bright spot, according to the new report, is in a category dubbed care process, which includes measures of preventative care, safe care, coordinated care, and engagement and patient preferences. So, I mean, there's some good, right? There's no question our cruel for-profit healthcare system is broken. Representative Pramila Jayapal, chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and lead House sponsor of the Medicare for All Act of 2021, said in a response to the report. It's time to fix it, Jayapal added. It's time to guarantee healthcare as a human right. It's time for Medicare for all. So what I want to do, and I've done this on the program before, I think the very first time I ever spoke with David Dole, I asked, like, what's it like in Canada if you need to go to a doctor? And I always want to, like, if I'm talking to someone who doesn't live in the United States, I always encourage them to share their experience, because I genuinely don't believe that our peers in America understand what we're missing. So we'll go to David and then Heem about your healthcare stories, because I think this is really important.
Yeah, so the first thing I always tell Americans is that I never think about healthcare. And that's the biggest benefit of having a single payer system, is you just never think, like, there's no reason to think about healthcare unless you need it. So, and when I need it, if I need to go to the doctor, we all get a health card. You walk in, you show your health card, they check the computer, you go in, and then you go home. Like, that's the entire process. And so and I should be clear here. I mean, Canada ranks second last on that list for good reason. We don't cover dental care. We don't cover pharma care. Home care isn't covered. Long-term care, like retirement homes, aren't covered. So there are serious gaps in our system for sure, but it's because our system doesn't go far enough. So in fact, Bernie's Medicare for All plan, if enacted, would go further than the Canadian healthcare system. So there's definitely downsides to our system because it doesn't go far enough, but just basic care, going to your family doctor is a very simple, streamlined process. I had surgery once, same thing. I mean, it was booked. It wasn't anything urgent, so it was booked 3 months ahead of time. I went on the day. I walk in again, show my health card. They bring me in, had the surgery. I came home. There's no on the phone with insurance companies. None of that's going on. It's all just covered, all free. And the only time I ever had to actually pay for healthcare is for prescriptions, but they're always, I mean, at least in my case, they've always been, minuscule, like, $20 for a month of medication for something. But, other people have had, worse stories in Canada with pharmacare because they have a lot more to pay for. So it's different depending on your experience. But yeah, I mean, the biggest benefit is you just never think about it.
Yeah, I'm curious, Heem, and this is kind of hard to assess, but in the event there was a party, if I don't know, the Liberals in Canada, they proposed an American-based healthcare system, a private model. How do you think that would go over in Canada?
Even the conservatives here don't push for that kind of model, and even in the UK too, they'll push for like maybe defunding it a little bit, but it's so popular here that it started on a provincial level and then spread across the rest of the country, and it's never looked back since. And I don't think it'll ever change. Hopefully, fingers crossed. I will say, David brought up some amazing things. Not worrying is a huge one. Just to give a little insight about my experience. So I do cancer research for my PhD, and I have family members that are in healthcare. And one thing that's very important to point out and to push back on people who are anti universal healthcare is to mention that there's still incentive for doctors to make money. So how it works is when David shows up to the office with his health card, the doctor, just the secretary, whatever, will scan his card or his code and his number, and they will bill the government. So the doctors are actually private contractors a lot of the time. And so they can work as much or as little as they want. and make as much or as little money as they want. Most of our doctors here aren't actually publicly employed employees. So here in Ontario, we have a list that we publish every year called the Sunshine List, which is like people who make over $100,000 a year and work in the public sector. So it could be like energy workers, police officers, things like this. And very few doctors are actually on this list. Very, very few like radiologists and stuff that are employed by the hospital. But other than that, most doctors run a private practice. So that's the one thing that I think is a nice benefit that Canada has, maybe over the UK, because we still have the incentivization that people always rip on and say like, oh, who's gonna want to become a doctor, right? So that's one thing. The other thing I will say is, like David said, I have had the similar experience. One day I woke up and I had an extreme pain in my back. I went to the emergency room. I got surgery that night. So it's not like this long wait time, fucking craziest thing in the world. Like most places in the world, they just triage you based on how bad you need care. If you show up and you're gushing blood, they're not going to be like, okay, you have to wait 7 hours. Like, I don't understand this caricature that people make sometimes. Like, and I've heard, I don't know, maybe I've heard David make this, or maybe Kyle Kalinske, where they say in America you triage too. You just triage based off of who's got the money or who's got the coverage, right? Yep. And one last thing I'll say on this is, as we learn more about medicine, we realize how important preventative care and early diagnosis is. Your outcomes, if you get prostate cancer at stage 1 diagnosed versus stage 4 diagnosed, are worlds apart, right? When it comes to mortality rates, 5-year, 10-year mortality rates. The sooner you can detect these things, the better outcomes you have, the less it's going to cost the entire system down the line. It's much easier to do a quick surgery or radiation on a small tumor versus like multiple rounds of chemotherapy, because now the cancer is metastasized all over your body. So that's another really important point, is the fact that in America right now, you have people who will get a little bump on their arm or in their breast, but they'll be too scared to go to the doctor. They'll put it off. No, it's not that bad. I don't want to pay the copay. I don't want to pay the... And then it's too late, right? So that's another massive thing. And I think I touched on the things I wanted to touch on. And I think there was one other thing, but I forgot for now.
We can come
it's
back
amazing.
Around. I think that you guys sharing your experiences is really, really crucial, because, and I don't know if Sarah and Donna have the same experiences as me, but people are genuinely afraid of the prospect of universal healthcare here. People that I've talked to, even family members, because they feel as if it's, it's foreign, first of all, right? It's literally a foreign concept because we don't have that here. But I try to make it more familiar, right? I talk about Medicare, Medicaid, like these types of programs that have existed in the United States that are loved. If you're a veteran in the United States, you kind of have a version of universal healthcare. So trying to like make it seem less foreign and more familiar is important. And like getting Canadians and British people to weigh in, I think is honestly one of the most
rhetorically effective.
It's so effective.
Yeah, good on you. Yeah.
Mike, I have a story I'd love to share with you to give contrast to this.
Sure.
So a lot of people don't know about this, but when I was a kid, I lived in New Zealand. My dad is a scientist and he was doing research there. And so my mom tells me this story, and I contrasted it with what happened to her during 2019 Christmas. And here's what happened. My mom had one of my siblings in a C-section. And not only is everything, completely paid for at, point of service, which means you're not paying anything out of pocket. After she had the C-section, she was sent home. And she was also sent home with a helper that came in every day to help her with certain things, move certain things around, because when you have a C-section for several months, you're not allowed to lift heavy things. And so this is healthcare in New Zealand. Okay, healthcare in New Zealand. Now, contrast it with the United States. Christmas, the day on Christmas Eve, my mom hurt her knee while she was climbing up the stairs. And we took her into, an orthopedic care place. And there is when we go in there, the doctor came in, looked at it, says, we need to do an MRI. And I said, that's great. There's this huge window. There's a big MRI machine here. I was very happy. Let's go do it. And, he was like, okay, let me go get this set up. And then they come back 30 minutes later. You know how they make you sit in the room forever and ever. And they say, well, the doctor's in network, but the MRI machine is not.
What? Oh, I didn't know the MRI machine didn't take its licensing test.
I kid you not. I think that was the day I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Because she can't walk. She hurt her knees.
That's
wow.
crazy.
And you know what's crazy? You bring up MRI machine. I went through a patient's chart like I think 2 weeks ago. You would not believe one patient had 70 different treatments, imaging, MRI, PET scan, CT scan, radiation, chemotherapy. Imagine if all of these things fell on the shoulder of one person to have to financially pay for or even pay partially for, right? It's like unfathomable. And as again, you saw in the last topic, I'm kind of like maybe not as left as some of you guys are on some like economic issues, but on this one issue when it comes to healthcare, because of the cost because of the burden that it has on one person, the cost has to be spread around. And that's why I'm super pro universal healthcare, because that cost has to get spread around. And like you said, the MRI machine being out of network, David and I have never had to worry about, we could go anywhere in the country, fall sick, and that's right, David? Like even though we have OHIP, we can get sick in any province.
Yeah, it's still I think it's still transfers. Yeah. And I forgot to mention, I mean, I had a kid 6 months ago, and we were we had to be in the hospital for a couple extra days than most people do in that process, and still, like, of course, no bill, nothing. They took care of us great, and it's just we go home and we have our child, and there's no we're not worried about the bills or anything. It's peace of mind that universal healthcare gives you, that Americans really have to understand that.
Yeah, and even if you have insurance, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're like protected, because my dad was a veteran, so he basically had universal health care, but there were ambulance rides that he took. He'd go to hospitals that weren't the VA's hospitals, but then it could be covered by Medicaid, and so there's a lot of overlap, but then there's a lot of parts that are left out. So like after my dad passed away last year, my mom got bill after bill after bill, and it's probably about $80,000 to $100,000 worth of medical bills. And in terms of like which ones she has to actually pay, she's like, I have no idea. I don't know if these bills are actually covered by insurance, the ones that we have, or the VA, but you get them anyway. And it's kind of like this, well, you cross your fingers and hope that you don't get sued, your Social Security doesn't get garnished. It's so even if you're covered, there's still like that peace of mind in America. It's not there, and it's bizarre. Sarah, have you had the same conversations that I've had, where people genuinely feel frightened by the prospect of universal healthcare?
So we all say that we're the worst, but I say we're first worst. So
there you go.
Bottom up, we're first. We're number one at the worst healthcare. Good for us. We did it, America. We're great again. So I have had I grew up with my dad's from the UK. So he had universal healthcare has always been like a thing in my house. My dad's like, I don't understand why we don't just have universal healthcare, because he grew up with it. And I've run into it where people don't, it's so misrepresented that they're like, oh, but it's going to cause taxes. And I like the freedom of choice that I have. And I don't want to lose my doctor, and I don't want to lose my network. Cause they all have this weird envisioned moment that and it says a lot about both veterans care, that I feel like people have this, and a lot about American healthcare. They feel like they're going to be corralled and forced to go to a VA hospital instead of their regular doctor. And I'm like, first of all, that says a lot about what you think about veterans care. Second of all, it just isn't the case. The choice doesn't change. You're still going to have access to whoever you want to go to. All the doctors become in network. I watched my buddy was trying to find a general practitioner, and he spent 2 weeks calling and calling and calling, trying to find someone in network. And they were all it'd say yes for part, but no for other parts. And it took him 2 weeks to find a general practitioner. And I have to explain to people, do you really think that's better than being able to call any doctor and go and not have to worry about it and think about it? You'd rather call 900 providers? And I had a healthcare story too. So I had a health scare when I was I think it was before I was running. But I started having this colossal, sharp pain that started at the back of my head. And it just spread, and to the point it was debilitating. I couldn't walk and I couldn't breathe. So we called an ambulance, and the ambulance came and took me away. To get from my house at the time to get to the emergency room entrance was less than half a mile. It was a third of a mile. It was a $940 ambulance bill to go a third of a mile. And my insurance was we did cover part of it. They covered it. Apparently $900 was the bill for me to pay. The total bill was like $3,000, and like utterly ridiculous nonsense. And so when I hear this and I hear people like talking about healthcare and they're so afraid of healthcare costs, I'm like, what if like, imagine a world where you're like, oh, wow, I feel this weird pain in my neck, and you don't have to write it out. You can just go to any doctor and it's covered, and then we all move on. Because like, I've tried to explain to people the concept of the social contract, and this might be a little bit too meta, I don't know, but like, when you live in a society, yes, I see you are participating in a society. When you live in a society, you engage in an unspoken social contract with your neighbors. Like, you all recognize that living in a society has lots and lots of benefits. Like, you have access to stores and bars and restaurants and people to work for you and people to do your roads and police officers and fire departments. And you have access to all of these resources that you collectively share as a community. So you're responsible for each other's safety, and you're responsible for each other's like ability to get to and from work. You're responsible for each other's ability to work for each other's businesses and things like that. Why the fuck wouldn't you also be responsible for each other's good health? And like, the healthier your workers are, the more they can come in like on time, the less sick days they take. The more people are healthy in our society, the more people's health is cared for, the better our society ultimately becomes, and the more fulfilling that social contract becomes. And we get to focus on other benefits in society, like spending our money that is no longer $600 a month on private insurance on things like saving for a house. Things like, I don't know, paying credit card debt, things like spending money in the economy. And like, people struggle to wrap their head around this concept of that social contract. But I'm like, the very fact that you live in a house and have neighbors next to you, you're engaged in a social contract. Like, whether you like it or not, you're gaining benefit from society collectively from living in one. And you can't get far enough away to escape that social contract. So why don't we just shut up, engage in the social contract, and care for each other's well-being all the way down, instead of like cherry picking like weirdos?
I think a really good comparison that I make sometimes, and I've heard other people making this as well, is like, we don't have privatized police really. Like, we have security and stuff, but you know, for the most part, you just dial 911 if you need help. You don't have privatized fire department because you don't want one person's house to burn down and burn the entire neighborhood down. Yet for some reason, when it comes to healthcare, the line is all of a sudden drawn. So I think, when I debate with like ANCAPs and stuff, they'll try to make an argument that like you could have a privatized fire department or something like this, and the entire argument just falls apart. And then you draw the connections to that to the healthcare, and you see how absurd it really is to at least not have a public option. Like, I'm not saying like that it has to be Medicare for all or bust, but like, everyone should be covered and everyone should have a public option. If you're a millionaire, billionaire, you want to go get an MRI every morning, go ahead and get one. But like, you know what I mean? It's
your body, your choice.
Yeah, your body, your choice. You want to get 100 vaccines? I don't care. Go ahead.
Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, in Canada, we still have private supplemental coverage, like on top of our existing system. A lot of it is for the gaps that we have, like dental care. But then there's things like, I don't know, private hospital rooms that you don't really need, but I guess if you want to pay into it, you can. So that's still, you know, if you for some reason needs a private option for something, you can still have that. But it's just there's no reason there's no reason to have that for general care. It makes absolutely no sense.
And there's actually something I wanted to bring up too, like really, really, really badly. And I was like so excited because we got to this point in the conversation. I was like, yeah, I want to bring this up. So like, I know we all talked about like, I'm about to get a lot of hate, I know, and I'm sorry for like the direct subject change, but like, just bear with me and like follow my train of thought for a minute. So like, we had like a lot of people doing a lot of work and a lot of organizing around Medicare for All recently. And like, I think part of the struggle, the wall that we hit is like, when you just have an event for something and you don't have a place to direct it, like you're not really doing anything with that energy. And so you don't really have like, you're just doing a thing. You're like showing up and doing a thing, but you're not like making any radical change or doing any radical change. And I'm so sad because like one of the main organizers, I'm not gonna say who it is because I don't know if she's like, they're okay with me saying their name. But I saw them like, I wish that they had centered this particular action at all of these events, because I could have been like, hell yeah, that's so creative. It's so cool. They suggested, I don't know, is their suggestion or I just happened to see it from them. They suggested potentially taking the United States of America, suing them in the UN courts for failure to provide adequate health care to suffering citizens during the pandemic, and like failure to provide a public option. And I'm like, oh my God, that is such a creative, like cool, awesome. It's boring, takes forever, it's arduous, but like, oh my gosh, the idea of dragging the United States in front of the rest of the developed world and saying, you are failing your citizens in such a catastrophic way that it is now a national crisis that the globe gets to weigh in on whether or not you're handling it right. Like, that should have been at the center of all that work, because I think that is such a creative action and like such a good action to start moving towards, like, use shame. America hates feeling shamed. Shame the shit out of America in front of the entire world for not having a public option. Like, that should have been, I think
America's shameless. We already know.
Yeah. I just want to.
Like, we hate being judged, so stick us in an arena where everyone's like, shame on America, and we'll be like,
we should do it at the Olympics, maybe after every podium.
Yes.
Just like, boo, you don't have health gear.
Yeah, exactly. Like, do something like that. Like, I just thought that was such a cool action. Like, I wish that those actions, like those individual events, had like centered that as the next step, because like that would have been just such a cool springboard for that energy. And like, I really want to draw attention to that, because I saw them saying this, and like, I just thought that was super, like, I never would have put that together, and my mind was like blown. I'm like, what a good idea.
I love that idea. And to the point about shaming, like, I want other developed countries to bully the United States.
Yes,
like
bully
Canada,
never
bully
gonna
the
happen.
fuck out of us.
I'm doing it.
If you listen, if you have to threaten to bomb us, I'm okay with it. We know you don't mean it.
I won't go that far.
Listen, you have a Middle Eastern guy on this panel. Be careful, okay? I don't want to get my channel deleted and shit like that, okay? I don't endorse anything that these panelists are saying right now.
I can only speak for America. Okay, it's nothing but love between the United States and Canada. Just bully us a little bit, maybe like nudge us in the right direction.
Yeah, like,
you know, one of the challenges, you know, that we have with healthcare, like, I think we're also under the impression that somehow single payer healthcare or Medicare for all would solve all our challenges. And what we don't realize is that even if we had single payer healthcare, we would have some major challenges. And one of the big challenges is that the United States has a huge lack of primary care physicians. I don't know if many of you are aware, but right now there are, I think, over 80,000 physicians that are trained and educated in India that are in the United States that came here after they got their medical degree, and they're practicing here because there's such a huge lack of doctors. And unless we, you know, I think one of you, maybe it was David or Dr. Heemdout, that said, you know, preventative care is a huge deal in ensuring that the outcomes are better. And, you know, that is the most important part of this entire discussion, that in the United States, we actually have no preventative care because it is so difficult to go see a primary care physician whenever you need to. Because if you're underinsured or if you have a huge deductible, if you go see a primary care physician, you're talking about $300 out of pocket. And not everybody has $300 just lying around to just go. Yeah, if you're lucky,
like
it's 300.
my friend, I asked him, it was like 5,000 or something as the deductible.
I mean, the deductible is high, but I'm just saying if you wanted to go to a primary care physician, you'd have to pay all of it out of pocket, is what I'm saying. None of that 300 would be covered because your deductible is 5,000. You're absolutely correct. But the challenge is that we don't have enough primary care physicians in this country. And unless we as a country understand this and put more primary care physicians in the pipeline, we're going to have a challenge even if we go to single payer healthcare. And you might be asking, so why don't we have, you know, primary care physicians? And the reason is primary care physicians in the United States don't really make a lot of money compared to the amount of investment that they put in to become a doctor. So many doctors have hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, anywhere between $100,000 to $300,000 in debt. And if you're a primary care physician, if you're like a pediatrician, you may start out at $110K or $150K. Now, for many of us, we think, oh, a six-figure salary is a big salary. But when you have a mortgage size student loan debt that you have to service, which you're not going to make that $110K until you finish your residency, that's a huge extra debt that you would have on top of someone who graduates from, school with no debt. So what doctors in the United States tend to do is they specialize, because if you specialize, you can make 400,000, you can make 450,000. If you're a specialist surgeon, you can make millions of dollars, right? And they specialize, so we don't have enough primary care physicians. And this is something, if we as a country don't energize, don't invest in people in the United States, our students in the United States, to go into primary care, we will not solve this healthcare problem. Because at the end of the day, we have to lower the cost of healthcare. And the way you lower the cost of healthcare is with preventative care, which was pointed out. Preventative care is what really lowers the cost of healthcare, and we don't have enough primary care physicians. And this is something that we really should be paying attention to if we want Medicare for all to be successful. Because guess what? People who have those gold plans in the United States, somehow they lucked out. They work in a union that negotiated it for them, or they work in a top 10 tech company. They have these really nice healthcare plans. They're literally scared that they're going to lose the quality of service that they have if we get single payer healthcare. Mm-hmm. And that fear, as much as I like to say, is unfounded, because we can solve for that. We can definitely solve for that, but we're not doing anything to solve for that. And I think that is something good to think about, that we really have to ensure that people who go into primary care, that they graduate debt free. The United States, investing in a doctor's education, like if you go into primary care physician, you would graduate debt free. We would get lots of primary care physician. And the last thing I want to leave with is a lot of Black Americans, specifically Black Americans, but also Latino Americans, they tend to not want to visit their primary care physicians if they're not of the same ethnicity. And it comes from a long background of distrust of the medical system. And imagine if we allowed, going to primary care, becoming a primary care physician, and you could graduate debt free. We could encourage so many people from small towns to go into primary care and then go back to their communities and look after their communities. People would love to go back to where their, grandparents are, their families live, and take care of their communities. And this is something that needs to be part of our healthcare solution.
Yeah, well said. So we're definitely not going to get to everything on the panel today, but I enjoy these really long, nuanced conversations. I think that this is really important, and it's lacking usually in political discourse, on the online left. So this is great. But before we go on to the next topic, I do want to get to our featured content creator to give the panelists, myself included, a little bit of a break. So this week we have a really exciting featured content creator. So this is an individual that has been producing really quality content, specifically as it relates to media bias, using basically manufacturing consent by Noam Chomsky. But I'm just going to let him explain it because I think he does it the best, folks. Here's our featured content creator of the week.
Dystopian times.
Called you a snake. They use the snake emoji.
Medicare for all is crazy.
I just saw it with my twins. They love the Trump cameo. That was one of the most interesting parts of the movie.
My name's Spencer, and I think the news sucks. Not indie news, not indie media, but corporate and mainstream media, they clearly suck. And with my channel, I try to explicate how and why they suck. And for me, and what I do, an important framework for that is the propaganda model laid out in manufacturing consent. See, there are 5 filters that ultimately orient mainstream news. The first being ownership. Hey look, we're at the corner of Fox Square and Fox Square. Fox News, which is owned by Fox Corporation. Let's cross the street to Rockefeller Center. NBC News, which is owned by Comcast. And Vanguard, which owns about 7% of both. Next is advertising. Cable networks need to bring in more than $1 million a day in advertising. Loss in viewership equals lower ad rates. Therefore, stories which challenge your audience are tantamount to burning money. Sources, determining the credibility of which can cost time and money. But official sources are already deemed credible. And look at this nice press room they set up for us. It's so easy. Flack is when we punish the media. This is anything from complaining on Twitter to seeking the extradition of a publisher. And the last is ideology. Whatever cultural theater of war we might be engaged in, there is a unifying ideology that transcends it and will kill us all. Fox and CNN may not agree on critical race theory or trans rights, but if there's a telecom merger or some crazy old guys talking about getting rid of fracking or abolishing private insurance, the networks will come together.
Abolishing private health insurance, those are crazy ideas.
And one natural outcome of these filters is the separation of victims into worthy and unworthy columns. Did you know that the New York Times wrote a small book's worth of articles on election fraud in Belarus? So why does Belarus get that kind of treatment but never Central or South America? Or why did the coup in Bolivia and the farmers' strike in India mostly get ignored? There are pretty concrete answers for all of these things. I also do interviews, book reviews, and sometimes dives into the media of other countries, and I would be incredibly grateful if you gave some of it a watch. But thank you for your time. And Mike, I've been watching your videos for years now. I think what you do is really valuable, especially promoting candidates. Thanks for all you do, and I'll see you all in the next one.
Well, folks, you can check out this person's channel. They're just over 1,000. So we want to get this person to 10,000 subscribers. It's a bit of an ambitious goal. I think we can do it, though. Let's support independent content creators. And if you're watching on Means TV, you'll have to find them on YouTube. But if you're on YouTube, thankfully, there will be a link in the description box. I just want to remind everyone that the last day to submit your channel is the last day of August, because the season finale of Dystopian Times is September 8th, I believe. So after that, I won't be doing any more Dystopian Times until next year. Maybe I'll do something else, but I'm going to shift to interviewing candidates. So at least get your submission in. Not going to cover everyone, but I want to give you the chance, folks. So now Donna had to dip out here. She was only going to be able to stay for a little bit. Thank you so much to Donna. And folks, I just want to lighten the mood a little bit, because we've talked about some really heavy topics, healthcare in the United States, Nina Turner's loss, but I actually have very good news for you. So I know currently right now you're wondering who's going to be the next progressive champion to run for president. Well, folks, fear not, because QAnon Congresswoman to appear at key Iowa event, sparking speculation of a White House run. I think I found my 2024 candidate, folks. QAnon believing Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene may be gearing up for a run at the White House. Bloomberg News' Jennifer Jacobs reports that Greene is scheduled to appear later this month at the Iowa State Fair, which she notes is a traditional venue for politicians contemplating presidential campaigns. Jacobs adds that it's not yet clear whether Marjorie Taylor Greene will speak at Iowa State Fair or just attend it, and she notes that the Des Moines Register this year isn't organizing a soapbox, which politicians in the past have used to raise their profiles for a national campaign. Greene so far has served less than one term in the United States House of Representatives, where she has been removed from her committee assignments over her past calls to have House Speaker Nancy Pelosi executed, among other reasons. So, okay. I mean, long story short, she very likely will run for president. So this is the question that I want to ask the panel. Viable or not? I have my answer, but can she win in the United States of America?
No shot. Maybe she could run, cause a stir, and then open the path for other QAnoners in the future. She could be the QAnon trailblazer. But I don't think it's similar to how Bernie Sanders got so close but never actually became the progressive champion we wanted. I don't think she has a chance. But someone in my chat did say, "Hell yeah, margin charge," and I feel like if that would be her slogan when she runs for sure.
Margin charge.
No. Stop it.
Sarah, in the United States of America, I honestly feel like your answer to this question is a gauge of the amount of trust you have in your fellow Americans. Is she viable? Yes or no?
No. Sorry, I'm not very hiding my feelings. That's one thing that I stopped having to do after a campaign.
Let it rip.
So,
yeah.
Now I'm if you had asked me in 3 years ago, I would have been no. But let me tell you something. not taking, I have like 2 key points on this, like not taking Nutter Butters seriously wound us up with Donald DJ Trumpo for 4 freaking years because no one took him seriously. We're lazy about campaigning. Hillary was lazy about campaigning. Everyone was like, oh, it's just Donald Trump. No way in hell. And that didn't go over very well. So do I think she has a chance? I don't think she doesn't have a chance. But the other thing that like to keep in mind, and this is so cool, if you've never read, like, I'm just going to plug a book I'm reading. So like, I'm sorry if this is like not allowed. So I'm reading Culture Warlords by Talia Lavin. If you have not read it, it is such beautiful insight on like anti-Semitism and white supremacy and in like the underbelly of these circles and like what it looks like in white supremacist circles. Like, part of the reason Donald Trump was able to say all these horrible things and be this horrible goblin, and he was able to like bridge stroll his way to the White House is because he was a white man saying it. But white supremacy and misogyny go really, really closely hand in hand. And so having a woman try and say the same crass things violates this like white supremacist idealized perfect woman narrative in their heads. So she can't get away with saying the same things and capture that same vote that got him elected. So I think she's unviable in the sense that to capture those white supremacist crowds, she as a woman can't come out and just espouse all these things. Like, and she's not like, she doesn't, she's trying to say what they consider masculine things as a woman. Like that's not gonna fly in those crowds. And they're the reason Donald Trump was elected. So I don't think she'll be able to capture the base she would need. So I don't think so, but I also think it would be lazy and stupid to not at least pretend
take
to
her
take
serious.
Yeah, don't downplay the threat. I just watched the first episode of the Humanist Report on the last Twitch stream, and in that first episode, I covered Donald Trump's campaign launch, and I asked myself this question: does Donald Trump have a chance? Should we be worried? And my answer, no, not at all. He doesn't have it. So now I've learned that.
Everybody did it. Myself included.
You guys think Donald Trump has a chance the second time?
I do.
No, I don't. I don't
think so.
actually.
I
don't think he does.
I do.
You do?
So the only reason that I say that is because like my partner's parents are like deep he was homeschooled all the way up through the church conservative. He became a dirty, disgusting, super left socialist, so he's fine. But both their kids are now totally socialist. It's so wild. But
That's
so
awesome.
he grew up in that community. I use them as a gauge for like what's going on because they're so in the rabbit hole. The amount of betrayal people feel in that community by Donald Trump, like we don't see it because we're not in those communities. Like they feel the same level of betrayal that some of these very online turbo leftists feel about AOC. For some reason, she wasn't able to change the tides of hundreds and hundreds of year old.
She's not the queen of America.
After 3 years, she can't change a 250-year-old system that's been marginally oppressing people like her forever. Get her out of there.
And designed to be incremental.
Exactly.
Right,
and like,
right.
so that's
a lot of
why
people I think don't realize that, but
they don't. But like,
they think it's like, why can't we just get everything done? It's like the system's literally the same reason that Donald Trump wasn't able to undo everything that's half decent in America is the same reason why progressives struggle to get progressive policies. It's literally meant to be incremental and slow.
At the institutional level, like that's one thing I really think is an important point. Institutionally speaking, by design, like this is all like rapid change in the United States is very, very rare. And that's why we look to, the 1930s, like the Green New Deal as times of like rapid change because they're so infrequent. But before we get too far down that rabbit hole, I've got to ask David Dole, Marjorie Greene, can she win?
I think she can win the nomination. I think it also depends on competition. I hadn't thought about until Sarah brought it up the how conservatives would feel about a woman saying these things as opposed to Donald Trump saying and getting away with it. So I because you brought that up, I think she would have a harder time. I think if DeSantis in Florida ran, he would have a better shot than Greene would. Also, assuming Trump doesn't run, I think if Trump runs, I think he gets the nomination. I mean, I know we can't put too much trust in polling, but polling does seem to lean conservative. So if the polling is to be believed, they still side with him for the most part. But yeah, I think she has a shot, absolutely, if she ran. I do have a question for Sarah, though. Why do they feel betrayed by Trump? What's the betrayal there?
So like the weird thing is like they think that because he's like he stopped carrying the torch of the like election fraud, like the big lie and all that stuff, and that like the anti-vax community has like this weird like overlap with these people, and like they feel like because he suddenly just took the COVID vaccine that like he's now betraying the values that he pretended
embracing
to espouse.
the deep state.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's part of the deep state and microchipped. And if you've ever watched your like dog get microchipped, did you know how fat that needle would have to be to fit a freaking microchip in your body? Oh my god.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. But like, so they feel betrayed by him because like now it's like Mike Lindell, the pillow guy, who's like handling all of this like election fraud stuff. He's kind of phased himself out and he's not really fighting as they see it. So they feel this level of like betrayal that's happened. And so there is conservative infighting and there is conservative drama, just like there's leftist drama. We just aren't in the circles to see it. So I have to like gaze through their Facebooks, unfortunately, to be able to see it.
Let me ask you guys a question. Since Marjorie Taylor Greene has said a lot of anti-Semitic things, Jewish space lasers famously, and what was the recent thing she said about the vaccine and the Holocaust?
She said it was basically comparable to the Holocaust.
And then she had to come out and say, no, the Holocaust was actually worse or some stupid shit.
Like she learned about the Holocaust for the first time ever.
She went to the museum. She went to the Holocaust museum. And I was like,
what I wonder is like, would Israel supporters hop off of her altogether and say she's an anti-Semite?
I would say no, because the support for Israel in the United States is largely based off of evangelicals. So they don't necessarily care about Israel insofar as like they're worried about Jewish people. They just like they view Israel as a means to an end, and the end being like, you know, Jewish people have to overtake Israel, and that could trigger like Jesus coming back. It's really like deep, and it's very like hyper religious, but I don't necessarily think that her anti-Semitism, surprisingly and contradictory, seemingly so, would count her out, because you know they view that as, well, we don't really care. I think there's a lot of even like anti-Semitism within the evangelical community that is very, you know, vocally pro-Israel. So I think that
there's some hypocrisy.
No. Sure.
They don't care about hypocrisy at all. I mean, Trump was anti-Semitic. I mean, he's made many statements that were anti-Semitic in speeches, and so they didn't care about that. Hypocrisy they don't care at all about.
Fair enough. It's ultimately like it all just comes back to like they have this like, oh my gosh, I learned so much from like being with someone that was so deep in the church. It's like it hurts my head some days, but like they're obsessed with Israel insofar as its relationship, like Mike said, to Jesus Christ. But as far as its relationship to like the Jewish people, like they don't see like they see that it's totally fine to be anti-Semitic but protect the homeland of Jesus, and like that's how they look at it. So they are it's just a mess, and like they don't really care about it in the sense of how the Jewish people care about Israel. They care about it in the sense of how like, oh, Jesus is homeland, the second coming, like the great hereafter is coming, paradise is coming. And it's just a total Looney Tunes theology that like I just don't. A dude who was high on mushrooms wrote a book at like hundreds of years ago, and they're like, it's real, and I'm like, I should have written a book like 2 weeks ago.
Most of the people who believe in this shit have never tried shrooms, by the way, so they to them it is magical.
They need shrooms.
Yeah, like if they did it, maybe they'd be like, hey, this isn't actually all that crazy. I could
maybe do it, and then like and I'm just gonna be honest, I'm again like not sure how real I can be, like having done them, I'm like, people believed like if people just did these, they'd turn around and look at Revelations and be like, oh, maybe not. Maybe dragons aren't gonna fly through the sky in the dead of night.
That if you watch, man, I'll have to reach out to you, Hakeem, afterwards. There's a documentary I watched on American evangelicals that even like growing up evangelical in this community, there was so much that I wasn't aware of. And it's mind blowing. I'll have to see if I can find it. But
please. I love that because I grew up secular, so religious fanaticism is a very interesting dynamic for me to explore.
If you guys, I don't know if you take this, no offense to anyone who is religious or has faith, like by all means, bless, have faith, whatever floats your boat. the sect with the sharpest decline of membership is actually evangelicalism now. So and I saw
that's because they're being silenced by the mainstream media.
Oh, that's
okay?
Vaccines. I saw this religiosity chart though that showed like the religiosity of all the different generations, and like you've like boomers, and then you've like Gen X right here, and then millennials are like down here, and we drop off, and then Gen Z literally just goes and tanks. So Gen Z is over it, and like it's just I'm really interested to see what happens next.
I think if I recall, all polling in general, like as people get older, they embrace it's like they're afraid of dying or something, and they get more religious. Like younger generations are always less religious, but somehow religion continues, right? Like it's always like if this current young generation grows up, religion's over. But then they grow up, and some of them become conservatives, and some of them become religious. And
like Nancy, reminder: Nancy Pelosi used to be like considered the most progressive member of the House. She was like a founding member of the Progressive Caucus. Like so,
Queen.
you know, she just got close to death, and something changed.
Introspection.
She got real estate. Is what happened. She got real estate and money.
Yeah. So on this note of like crazy people, I think that's the perfect segue into our weekly dose of stupidity, and it's very appropriate that we have a doctor on for this week's segment, folks.
In a world of politics dominated by the strange, the deranged, and outright insane, we'll now take a moment to shine a light on the craziest of what politics has to offer. This is your weekly dose of stupidity.
So I've been focused on vaccine hesitancy on this channel, and the rhetoric for vaccine hesitancy and anti-vaxxers is getting increasingly deranged. Not that, you know, being anti-vax in and of itself is an issue, but the rhetoric is getting increasingly absurd. And now there's a subset of the right that wants to characterize people who are anti-vax as like this new marginalized group, and they're trying to make it seem as if this is a civil rights issue, and that, you know, being anti-vax is an immutable characteristic. I'm gonna just shut up and let you watch. There's gonna be a lot here to unpack when it's done, but we'll just try to get through the whole thing. And this man right here is going to drop a nuclear take at the end. So wait for it.
Great advice, because so many pastors don't want to get involved in these kind of fights. But this really is a fight for religion as well. We know the left is waging war on those who want to believe in God, who believe in religion. Let me play a example from you from Joe Biden, just to show you how far this goes.
I want to be crystal clear about what's happening in the country today. We have a pandemic of the unvaccinated. That means if you're unvaccinated, you're much more likely to, 1, get COVID-19, 2, get hospitalized, and 3, die if you get it.
How dare you?
Yeah, they're playing. This comes straight out of the Marxist handbook, right? You try to set as many different.
I never got that.
Yeah, I read about that in the handbook.
You can tear it apart and rebuild it in the image you want. At first in America, it was racial tension, black versus white. Now we're moving from vaccinated to the unvaccinated. And I'll tell you, it's scary, because whenever you see guys saying, you see leaders saying, you can go to the gym if you have the vaccination. You see the president talking about the problem that is the unvaccinated. These things have played out before in history, where you take a certain group of people and demonize them. And I'll tell you what it is. It's a framework for animosity between two groups at best. At worst, it's a framework for a future genocide. We need to stand up and speak out against this kind of stuff. This isn't even FDA approved. It is insanity.
Well, look, Pastor, I appreciate you coming on the program with this strong voice, because I think others will learn from you. And I think others who are pastors as well will learn from this, and there's strength in numbers. And so I appreciate you laying it on the line for us. God bless you, sir. We'll talk again soon.
Okay, so first question I want to ask, David, after watching that, why should I not jump off of a cliff in Roblox?
Well, luckily, I don't think most people think that way. So he claims here that the unvaccinated are there's going to be like a genocide of the unvaccinated. They're committing it against themselves by not getting the vaccine. Right. That's the genocide. And comparing it to skin color, you're not born with the vaccine. You're like the way you're born black or it's so. it's so incredibly stupid. I can't. This is my biggest issue. I have no conservatives in my family. I didn't grow up conservative. I grew up like kind of religious, but not like, completely off the deep end religious. But I don't understand why people can't see through this bullshit. Like, I really have a hard time understanding how someone can watch that and be like, that guy's exactly right. Being black is just like being unvaccinated. Like, how do you make these comparisons with a straight face? I don't understand how people could do this.
Yeah. Dr. Heem, I've got to ask you, because you are like this is your field. So how, like, does your head, like, is it going to explode? Like, I'm honestly speechless. Like, I can't find the words. Like, after I watched that, my IQ score like dropped significantly.
Okay. So first of all, quick criticism of Joe Biden here. I don't like that he said that we have a pandemic of the unvaccinated. That just seems like you're downplaying the term pandemic. There's definitely a better word out there that you can use instead of pandemic of the unvaccinated. Yeah. So that's just the first thing right away. I'm super nitpicky when it comes to vaccine rhetoric and choosing your words carefully. There's a lot of problematic things, not just that this guy said, that I've been hearing a lot lately. For example, and I got into politics because I like to watch Jimmy Dore, but he said this recently on Joe Rogan. He said it's a experimental vaccine. Experimental vaccine, to me, is one of the most harmful pieces of rhetoric when it comes to vaccine research, or this vaccine. Why? Because it was experimental when they were doing human trials. The human trials are now finished. Like, this no longer an experimental vaccine. It's been studied. It's 400,000 people enlisted for, I think, Pfizer phase 3 trial, and now it's been like a year since people have been vaccinating. This idea that it's experimental, or another one that it's not FDA approved, as though there is some testing that the FDA didn't do, or like that they're still expecting to do before they pass the FDA approval. The FDA approval, from what I've seen, the only difference between the emergency use and the actual FDA approval is like paperwork and kind of like bureaucratic things. I didn't see any like specific, this test wasn't done or something like this. And I think these kind of things are so dangerous. And a lot of people say, how can I be anti-vax? I got the vaccine. You can you can push anti-vax rhetoric without being without actually being anti-vax yourself. It's why we have to be very responsible when it comes to this stuff. And there's people even in healthcare that are, I don't know, like maybe negligent or not quite as careful as they should be when it comes to the rhetoric on this stuff. I debate COVID deniers on my stream all the time. It's like one of my features. And it blows my mind that this kind of stuff is so widely accepted. And what really, really hurts me is that pro-vaccine people aren't charismatic. They're not out here making YouTube videos that get shares, tons and tons of shares. The people who are charismatic are the COVID deniers, the social media influencers who have a vested interest in peddling this misinformation because it gets tons of fucking clicks. Scientists who are actually doing COVID research don't have fucking YouTube channels to come and do this shit.
Maybe they should, though. That should be part of the.
Green is on TikTok.
Think about how we still rely on Bill Nye the Science Guy for a lot of our scientific communication. And this is actually one of the shortcomings of the scientific community. Like, one of my PhD courses is scientific communication, because the scientific community has realized that, like, in the last few decades, we've really there's a big gap between lay understanding of science and the scientists' perception of what people understand. Like, people go to all kinds of conferences, give these crazy elaborate talks, but no one's listening because they're so caught up in their own jargon. And that's a push that's being done in the academic field now, is like, listen, you don't need to be the craziest, smartest nerd in the world. What you need to be able to do is convey your message to people on a stage, talk to people, and have a personality to go along with your facts. And I hope that, like, we learn a lot from this pandemic, and this is not going to be the last pandemic probably, and that we can take some lessons away from this.
Yeah. Sarah, how about what are your thoughts on this? Because I feel like, even though I'm relatively desensitized to this kind of like bombastic rhetoric, I still, like, somehow they managed to like out crazy what I thought was like the ceiling. Like they burst through that ceiling. And it's really exhausting to the point where there's so much misinformation, like what he was talking about. It's hard to keep up, right? Because I certainly have been trying to tackle anti-vax sentiment on my channel. I know David has been doing that as well. It's so hard because one of the issues with anti-vax people, and I've seen this firsthand, is that if you show them like a humanist report or a David Dole video, or if you send them like these debates with Dr. Heem, who I'm sure like obviously is prevailing in these debates, it still doesn't matter because it's about trust, and they're not going to trust someone who they don't know. And so people in my family who are conservative, who are anti-vax, they didn't actually change their mind until they saw firsthand how COVID affected one of our family members. And it's things like that. So I think that public health messaging is super complex, and Hume touched on it. It's like the CDC had this issue with the mask mandate and whatnot before Delta hit the United States. How to draft public health messaging that's concise and clear and doesn't drive more hysteria. But Sarah, what is your thoughts on overall, like, the level of ferocity of anti-vaxxers in the United States? I feel like it's making me feel stupid.
So I have like so many thoughts, and some of my takes are about to be a little spicy. So I'm sorry, everybody.
Have at it.
We love spice.
I mean, I say I'm sorry, but am I really sorry? I'm not.
Don't be sorry.
So like one of the things that like this, just hearing the clip, like it's always these like white conservative men who are like, we're on the brink of genocide. It's going to be a tool of genocide. This concept of like governmental genocide is like, you don't think about it in these terms, but like it's so deeply rooted in the concept of white supremacy. Like, it's not that they think there's going to be like a genocide. It's that they're so afraid of losing that inherent white privilege that they equate having to do anything responsible or having to be responsible for anything, including like their own bodies and their neighbors, that like they equate that with like a loss of privilege. And they don't view it as like, they couch it in these like sneaky white supremacist terms to like scare people into not getting the vaccine. And like a lot of people really haven't done the internal work to like recognize that stuff and learn to dismantle their internalized white supremacy, learn to dismantle their internalized misogyny. And like, we find it on the left too. Like you have anti-vaxxer leftists too. And like people think they adopt this label of leftist and they're like, I'm good, I don't have to do the work anymore. But like they don't do that inner soul work of like, oh my gosh, like how is this enabling white supremacist systems in America? Because ultimately people of color are the ones that are dying and suffering the most because of COVID. So when you hear these like, oh, it's going to create tools for genocide, they're really just talking about a loss of white privilege and a loss of whiteness. But there is like a liberal question buried in here. Like I know we all hate the word liberal, and I mean like politically liberal question here. And it is worth asking about it. And I think it's ultimately what these people are trying to get to is like the concept of government overreach is really more what they're talking about, but it's so couched in fear of vaccines and all this vaccine fear mongering. Because like if you read George Lakoff, he talks about how like conservatives' fear centers are literally bigger in their brains than liberals. Like there are actual like biochemical differences in the brains. It's so cool. Read George Lakoff. So you get this like these people that are like, they're actually trying to ask the question about government overreach more than they're trying to talk about like the vaccines. And like, this is where I start to get people's like, you're so scared of it being like microchipped and stuff like that. But like, ultimately this tech bro stuff that we worship is already overreach. The NSA is already overreach. Like if you're going to talk about like these overreaches into our health, the government getting involved in vaccinations, like you are walking around tagging yourself, paying off every cell phone tower. The government could turn on your Alexa and find your Netflix history if they want. Like you've already, and now these same people are also screaming to put cameras in schools so we can watch what our kids are being taught. Like they're asking for more facial recognition software. They've stopped talking about like the hyper-militarization of the police as like a national security issue. And like we've allowed ourselves to be stripped of these securities that like they're struggling to reconcile. Like the problem is actually their question of government overreach, but they can't like understand that we've already allowed it to happen. And this is just a version of government overreach that's creating public good. Because at the end of the day, like forcing people to get vaccinated, if we're being honest, really isn't even about the unvaccinated people getting vaccinated. It's about the healthcare workers that have to be manning those beds around the clock. They have to be doing that work. Nurses are quitting left and right. We're losing healthcare.
You should see how low the morale in the hospital has been
It's
the entire
horrible.
pandemic, because we used to look at each other in the hallways and smile, or, you know, a quick chat. Now everyone's masked up. Everyone's working crazy hours. We're social distancing in our offices. So the morale has been brutal, and like, yeah, it's been very taxing on I mean, and listen, I don't even work in the COVID. I do research, so like I can only imagine if someone had to wear the face shield, the mask, the everything for the, you know, endless hours. It's
like 15-hour days, and like and we're losing healthcare staff left and right, and like and people didn't understand the beginning either, like because they didn't literally see people dying in the streets of their city. They didn't understand that hospitals were overwhelmed, and the reason we were masking and quarantining wasn't because people were like collapsing. It wasn't like The Stand where people are coughing themselves to death and then they're dying in the streets. It's that they're dying in the hallways of these hospitals, but we're removed from that, so we didn't see it, and the healthcare staff were burning out and frying, and that's why it was so hard for people to make that decision and start trying to pretend it was about government overreach. But like the right is so good at fear messaging. Like, Heem, I love that you're talking about like healthcare messaging and like really getting in there as scientists, because as much as I love my friends that do like science work, I'm like, I love
They're
you.
Boring.
You should never speak in front of a crowd. You have like the speaking energy of like a piece of toast, and I love those people. No offense, but like,
it's not just the energy too. It's also like some of the concepts are really difficult to explain if you haven't actually thought about how you would explain it to like a fourth grader or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if I come out here, I'm like, yeah, you need to have the mRNA be and then you need the spike protein and the antigens. Like people are just like in 1 year, out the other year, right? I want to give you guys, in my recent COVID debates, I've been using this example and I like it a lot. And I'll hand this over to you guys. You can use it in your future COVID discussions. I tell people, you don't trust the government on this COVID stuff, right? They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. What about if the government sent you an alert on your phone right now? And they were like, listen, we have had a nuclear accident and there's radiation in the air and everyone is exposed. And you need to evacuate right now. Would you think it's okay for a mother to tell her child, don't worry, I don't feel the radiation on my skin. We're not going to listen to them. And most of them are like, no, that's not right. And then I'm like, okay, so now let's draw the comparison to show you why this is 1-to-1. And I find that works very well, because once you start to distrust the system of government, it's like a slippery slope, or like, you know, once you start to distrust the establishment, it's a slippery slope, and I can draw you to some crazy conclusions from there. And I think that like that is a good rhetorical tactic to use to say, listen, if you don't trust this, what do you trust? How do you know that insulin will work if you have diabetes? You don't know that. Like, you didn't actually look at how do you know what's in the side of anything, right? If people say what's in the inside, so like these kind of discussions I think are nice. And sometimes I find people who are pro-vax, no offense to us, but we're a little dismissive, too dismissive, too quick. I think we should be a little bit more patient. And, you know, if people take baby steps to get there, I like it. And I'm for that.
There's a certain segment of this discussion that I feel like maybe it's not as big as I think it is, but there are people who are apolitical, or maybe even on the left, who are anti-vax, and that's because they have this fear of big pharma. And I mean, I covered a video a couple of weeks ago where there was someone who was a pharmaceutical researcher, and she was anti-vax, and she was in the hospital with COVID-19, and now she realized she should have got the vaccine, but she was anti-vax as a pharmaceutical researcher. And you know, you make the connection here. These people are hyper aware of how destructive big pharma has been, but then apply that to everything, including vaccines. Even though they're backed up by science, even though we see in the real world people ending up in the hospital are unvaccinated, they still have this fear of big pharma that almost overtakes everything else. And I mean,
logic.
Yeah, but there's someone in my life who close member of my family, and she's a nurse, and she's also anti-vax, and she's not conservative. She's left, she's apolitical, but she has this skepticism of big pharma, and I understand that aspect of it. And I think if we talk to these people, at least that section of it, talk to them in a way where we understand, yes, big pharma has had this destruction, but we have to look at, the real world impact right now of the vaccine, what it's had. I mean, clearly it's brought the numbers down, and now people that are in the hospital are unvaccinated. We have to be able to, make these connections and not have our fear of one thing applied to every aspect of the industry.
And you know what's actually, I would even take it a step further. I would say, yeah, pharmaceutical companies, all they care about is money. What's the good way to make money? To make an effective vaccine. What's a really bad way to make money? To make a vaccine that doesn't work. Look at what happened to AstraZeneca after 2 people got a tummy ache or something, right? Like this is like all eyes are on these pharma companies. They will do everything more than any other time in their history of their company to make sure that those vaccines are effective because they want to make money. So it doesn't have to be like this, they're changing their motive. No, their motive is still to make money, and they will do that by making an effective vaccine. And I think that is like a good way to push back on that, because I agree with you. There's a lot, especially on the left, there's a lot of anti-pharma, anti-big pharma rhetoric. And again, like it's important that, like, I don't know, I like to, when I talk to anybody, even if I talk to a Nazi, I like to like be compassionate as much as I can and try to have good faith responses rather than calling them an idiot or something like that.
Yeah. And I read someone talked about like the people are like they're afraid of the partisanship that's happening in science, and like that is super valid. Like that's also a really valid fear. And like I think sometimes too we like people lose sight of the fact that the folks that have been working earnestly on healthcare, on actual like vaccines, the scientists that are in there doing the work, that are doing the research, these are people who literally dedicated their lives because they want to save people and help people. The people actually making the vaccine, like doing that labor of making a vaccine, are doing it as a labor of like love for humanity and desire to cure a disease. The people that are monetizing it and patenting it and then doing all this horrible stuff, that's like the business side. Those are the sales folks, the CEOs, the owners of the companies. But the actual researchers, the people that are actually like doing the scientific in the lab work, these are people coming from a place of compassion. So like,
and it's cutting edge.
Yeah, and even
it's
if
not some schleps, these are some of the most well-educated people that are working on this.
And they really are. So like, even if you're afraid of like the company itself, like trust the fact that like these people that have made this vaccine, the people that have done this labor have worked round the clock for over a year to get something out there to save people. So I trust the people that are in the lab who've done the work. And like, yeah, the people at the top suck because they've monetized it and politicized it, but like at least have enough faith in the people working in the lab to like get the job done. And like rehumanizing that to people is really, really successful for me, because like people forget that it's not this big entity. It's like, John down in the lab who's just diligently putting in 22-hour days to try and like save humanity. Like there are people who generally care or genuinely care.
Yeah. Well, folks, if there's nothing left about this subject, we will go ahead and close. We didn't get to talk about all of our topics. And by the way, before the chat comes from my throat, I promise you the pet segment is coming. Here's what I'm going to do, okay? So we usually, like, in lieu of touching grass, we'll look at cute pictures of dogs and cats when we discuss, like, really, like, terrible subjects. But I'll save that thread where you all sent me lots and lots of photos, and I will look at it on either the next panel or the one after that. The next panel there's a lot of people, so I usually try to save that, like, if I don't have as much topics or if I don't have as much people. We'll get to it, I promise. Okay, so do not come for my throats. If you do, I will cancel that segment.
You can your chat can blame me because I'm the hottest take on pets ever, so it's probably best I'm not here for that.
Do I? Oh, him.
Listen, okay, let me give you guys an explanation. Okay, I'm an immigrant. Okay, hang on. I'm an immigrant from Iran. Okay. In Iran, there's no dogs. Okay, people, it's haram. Like they literally put down dogs because it's against like in the Islamic religion, it's like, I don't know, fucking dirty or some shit. So literally, people don't have pet dogs in Iran. So I didn't see like my first real life dog until I moved to Canada and I was like 7 years old.
No,
and the fucking and the apartment building I lived in, a dog jumped out of the first floor balcony and like attacked me and shit when I was still really young. It's like traumatized. Swear to God, traumatized. Yeah, and I was 7 years old. So like to this day, and by the way, I have my own dog, a little cute dog my parents have, but like, so I love my dog, but I hate everyone else's dogs because I don't know any dog's personality. I don't speak dog. I don't know if your dog is nice. People are always like, yeah, my dog is such a sweetheart. Yeah, until it bites my leg off. So usually I have a segment on my stream similar to yours where people send me pictures of their pets and I roast them. I'm like, your cat looks evil. Your dog looks like it's got multiple personalities. Yeah.
That'd be hilarious, actually.
So when you brought up...
Okay, no. Heem, I've got to push back on that. If you met my dogs, you would get
out of here.
All right, before we leave, I want to give the panel a chance to basically plug their projects, plug what they're doing, their YouTube channels, their Twitch streams, or just say whatever you want to say. Sarah, we'll start with you.
Awesome. Well, I am now freshly, as of like 72 hours ago, I am launching a campaign consulting business called Groundwork Campaigns, and it is all about like the gaps in campaigning. So when people first start their campaigns, like I'm going to campaign for office, but they don't understand like, well, what roles do you need? And then when you have a staff, like how do you get them to get along with each other? How do you get, what's accountability? How do you get people to like, what's the trajectory for reporting stuff? Who monitors projects? How do you monitor projects? How do you run a meeting? And it's all this really basic stuff that like you think would come naturally, but I think like we're very in it. So, and I especially have experience having sucked at it and failed and not had this information. And every time I talk to candidates, it is like the thing they talk about is they're like, I don't even really know who I need on my campaign. Do I even need a campaign manager? Which horrifies me because yes, you do. But I started a campaign consulting service where we are intended to be temporary. We don't want you to pay us every month. We want to give people intensive, big package courses, help them build structure, build internal organization, and then just go and campaign. So when someone doesn't get along with someone else or has a grievance, they know exactly how to handle it. When someone has a task and they need to pass it off, they know exactly how to handle it. And candidates can just go talk to voters and volunteers can just go knock doors. So Groundwork Campaigns, that's my new current venture. Hit me up if you're thinking about starting a campaign. I also do initial consulting to help people find the right office for them if they're not sure.
That's awesome. That's like literally exactly what we need on the left, because a lot of the candidates who I talk to, they're like, you know what? I wanted to run for Congress and make a difference. So literally the first thing that I did was Google, how do I run for Congress? I love that you're doing that. That's excellent.
And if Congress isn't your jam, I just recommended someone run for like district, county fire division. So like you would be shocked at where you can apply things like climate justice. So like hit me up if you want to do something and you're not sure. It's not limited to just like Congress. So yeah, hit me up.
Okay. Awesome. I think that was the hottest take that you dropped in all of the panel, because you're getting a lot of responses to that.
Yo, because you know what's funny? When you said the Nina Turner thing, I'm like, oh, this is gonna get spicy, because like I don't know, I might be a little bit disagreeing with that. And then you said we're gonna look at cute pictures of pets. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna burn every bridge. None of these people are ever gonna talk to me again after this. I gotta stay true to myself.
It's fine, I got you covered.
Heem, we can still be friends, but I am going to radicalize you, and I'm gonna spam pictures of my animals to you. Well, actually, I won't, because if you
are you gonna radicalize me politically or petly?
I don't care about your politics, team, as long as you love cats and dogs.
All right, we'll go for a walk in the dog park.
There we go. Okay, David Dole, tell us what you have down the pipeline, what you're doing, where to find you.
Down the pipeline, I'll figure out tomorrow morning when I look at the news. But check out therationalnationals.com. That's the YouTube page, and or on Twitter at David Dole. My name's spelled right there. And yeah, there we go. And actually, I would love to have Sarah and Dr. Heemdout at some point on the show. I think you both are very interesting and brilliant and bring those different perspectives. I would love to hear, Sarah, more about your consulting. That sounds like a brilliant idea. So I would love for you to come on the show and talk about that. And Heemdout, I had no idea you were an actual doctor or like did actual medical research. That's amazing. So I want to talk to you about that as well.
Yeah, for sure, David. I've been a big fan of yours, and we're both from the 416. So I've always liked your takes, and it's lit.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. So, Dr. Heemdout, tell everyone where you are, what you're doing, how we can support you.
So I stream on Twitch and on YouTube. 5:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. usually every morning, Monday to Friday. and then I go do research at the hospital until 5. So I do debates, I do news, I do, I don't know, funny shit, like whatever. We do game shows sometimes. I have like a soundboard on my stream where I'll do laugh tracks and stuff. Sometimes I like to do my Persian accent, make fun of my mama and baba who came here. And just overall, it's a really fun stream. I just hired a YouTube editor, so I'm really happy about that. Now we're going to be pumping out consistent content. And I do a podcast with Dylan Burns from Dylan Burns TV that we just started as well. Yeah, we just started. We had the first episode and it was really, really awesome. So
nice.
Yeah, and it was really nice to meet you, Sarah, David, Mike. You guys have been fucking. I look up to you guys, and I'm really glad to have been able to bounce ideas back and forth with you all.
Yeah, this was dope. I'm just going to point out I swore more than any of you, so I carried this today.
Carried the quota. Sarah's the only one who met the quota.
Only one. I do love to win.
Fucking fuck. All right, fucking. I'll fucking talk to you guys later. All right.
Thank you so much.
All right, cheers, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
All right, take care, folks.
Bye, everybody.
Dystopian Times. I will be back for super chats and questions and comments. Thank you all so much to the panel. You all are just incredible people.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Well, folks, that was a fantastic show. I mean, what a great panel. Really great people. I really, really enjoy doing these. Even though like the situation in the country doesn't change, just like talking to other people is so therapeutic. But before I get to the questions from the chat, I do want to get to the super chats. By the way, I'm trying to figure out. So it turns out last week I missed a couple of super chats, and I want to take time to read those right now because I feel so bad that I missed those. So we'll get to them one by one. So what do you mean? Sends in $2 saying I'm taking on anti-vaxxers on my TikTok. That's incredible. That is really a noble cause, and I appreciate that you're doing that. It's definitely needed. Michael Cuomo says here in Nassau County, New York, cops can sue anyone for harassment with the $4.99 super chat. I was not aware of that, but that sounds absurd to me. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Michael Cuomo. I did not know. We have What Do You Mean? With another $2 super chat. David Dole, oh yeah, such a fantastic person. I agree. David Dole is amazing. Yep X with a $2 super chat says with inflation, minimum wage would be about $40 an hour. Wow. Yeah, I thought it was something like $25 or $30 depending on the county that you live in. But I mean, by now I wouldn't be surprised. I haven't checked recently. Infinite Content with a $5 super chat says, panel, remember that Nina's fight isn't over. She gets to run this back. She gets to run this back in the spring. This needs to be an incessant campaign from this point on. Thank you, Infinite, for the reminder. That is a really great point. We have Crouching Dragon with a $10 super chat, no message, but a super sticker. Thank you so much. Now, I believe these are the super chats that I missed. There were only a couple last week, so I didn't miss too much, thankfully. But Jay Evans sent in a $20 super chat. Jay, thank you so much. That is just incredibly kind. To achieve real social reform, we have to see fellow Americans as family, which is hard to do when we're all different cultures and ethnicities. Yeah, it's a work in progress, right? But I think it's worthwhile to pursue. Planeta Tierra with a $5 super chat says thanks. Nice time. This was last week. Thank you so much. And I believe that is everything. So let me switch back over to the YouTube chat. Folks, how are we doing today? How's everyone holding up? Given the defeat that we felt, are we all okay? Are we taking time for ourselves to kind of like unplug from the internet and just kind of like hang out? I am really looking forward to like not paying attention to the news this weekend, spending time with family, playing video games. I really feel like when we get so like involved and we follow campaigns like Nina Turner's really closely, we have to allow ourselves time to recover. I think it's really important. By the way, we have Donna. I forgot to include her information here. If you want to check out her campaign, so Donna IMMTX. And by the way, Donna will be back on the program. I will be doing weekly candidate interviews. So right after the season finale of Dystopian Times, there's going to be a little bit of a break. And probably in October, I will be doing weekly candidate interviews. So very soon, I'm going to be needing recommendations as to who you want to see on the program. I'm setting up a vetting process for candidates. Oh, thank you, Mr. Anderson. I mean, always coming in clutch. By the way, thank you all so much to our wonderful mod, Sec Mara. Mr. Anderson says, I really, really appreciate it. Information here. Please check out Donna Imam. Support her campaign. She is an incredible candidate. I mean, Donna is essentially a genius. Lots and lots of like excellent commentary tonight. Let's see here. Another $5 super chat here. This one's from David. I think there's a silver lining in Nina losing because she can run again in a few months and lead the charge nationally in the primaries. I like the way you think. I like that. To me, and in this moment, it kind of sometimes feels like this is it. We had our one shot at Nina Turner, and that was it. And I don't necessarily think it's irrational to have that view because we're suffering that heartbreak from Bernie Sanders. The difference is Nina Turner is very, very, very young. She will be back. We have to tell ourselves that. And like the great point that David Dole brought up is that Cori Bush, she lost by, 20 points in 2018, came back and won in 2020. So, let's try to keep the hope alive, right, folks? I'm trying my best. Thank you, David. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Shadow Dragon says, thank you, mods. You are like, God. Folks, our mods in our community is just incredible. Mr. Anderson, thank you so much. Everyone, give a round of applause to Mr. Anderson, who works tirelessly to make this community what it is today. Thank you so much to Sec Mara, who's talking about Clone Wars, but that was the last thing that I could find. Thank you so much, Sec Mara. It's appropriate because I'm wearing a Mandalorian shirt. Grumpy Cat says, great show, Mike. Please repeat when the last Dystopian Times will be for this year. So I want to say it's September 8th. It's a Wednesday. And so maybe I'll bring it back like for a winter or like a holiday special, because you know how I always do these like War on Christmas dumb shit like every December. I might bring back like Dystopian Times for a holiday special before bringing it back next year. Although I'm not necessarily sure, it might be brought back like season 2 of Dystopian Times might be a little bit more limited because next year is 2022, which is an election year. And so I really like to make sure I have maximum time available to really talk about candidates. So I might do like candidate panels in lieu of like progressive podcast host panels. We'll see. Holly says, thank you, lovely people. We have Latif Mins here with the applause. Thank you so much, Latif. Appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for watching. We have Rich Wise says, trans Satanist anarchist with her fuck the police slogan wins Republican nomination for New Hampshire County Sheriff after running unopposed. Yeah, that was kind of like what Dr. Humes was talking about, right? Where like just like have someone run as like this corporate Democrat, get in, go full mask off. I think that'd be hilarious. Okay, so Nima P. Azar with the $5 euros says, Mike, what's your view of TYT smearing award-winning anti-war journalists like Aaron Mate and Assange? Do you think that's acceptable? Well, I don't think that smearing of anyone is acceptable. So I don't know what they said about Assange and what they said about Aaron Mate. If I'm remembering correctly, I don't agree with that. So yeah, I don't agree with what they said. I don't remember what they said. Did they say he was a Russian asset or something? I don't know. I don't know what they said, but I don't agree. I think that if somebody is taking money from like a foreign government, if you're going to say that, then you should certainly bring receipts. So I don't agree with that. Having said that, though, I don't agree with the smears, the sexism and misogyny directed toward Anna Kasparian by a lot of individuals, like Jimmy Dore from that segment. But yeah, I appreciate you asking the question, but I'm trying to stay out of that drama because ultimately, it doesn't affect me, and I don't care. So why is TYT calling homeless people unhoused? So unhoused is basically the more correct term to use. I think that a lot of people believe that if you say homeless, it has negative connotations. So a lot more people have been using the words unhoused. So that's what I believe. Drama. Yeah, folks, I'm already embroiled in so much drama online, and I try to not get involved, and I try to not like weigh in as much as possible. But I mean, look, podcast hosts have egos, and they're going to fight. They're going to smear each other. They're going to battle. But at the end of the day, I really, really want people to focus on policy. It drives me insane that for months now we've been talking about this battle between podcast hosts when like we're staring down the barrel of a gun when it comes to climate change, right? I mean, we have an eviction crisis, even though the moratorium on eviction is extended until October 3rd. We have all of that. Who gives a shit about what these podcast hosts say about one another? I mean, I'll engage sometimes in the fighting online, but at the end of the day, please understand that that does not matter in comparison to all of the issues. This is all noise that at the end of the day isn't going to move us closer towards Medicare for all. So, you know, we're all human beings, so we're gonna argue sometimes. I do it, right? But when it happens, I think it's best that you try to tune it out, because it literally doesn't matter. It's a distraction. Celeste, thank you so much for the super sticker. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. You're so kind. Yeah, and folks, I just want to be very clear. I posted a video about the online left needing to touch grass. That absolutely includes myself as well. I am terminally online, and I engage in a lot of the things that I'm critical of. And people think that I'm like pointing the finger at everyone else, but I'm very clear that it's myself too sometimes. I think that we're all part of the problem. Tensions are high right now because the left is lost. There's no leadership on the left. There's no Bernie Sanders and Nina Turner that just lost. So tensions are high. But I swear, I promise you, focusing on the issues is much more important. And if you go through my catalog of videos, you're going to see dumb videos from time to time, like I'm talking shit about Dave Rubin or dunking on Marjorie Greene. But I try always to talk about the real issues. I talked about the Flint water crisis. Great story from Jordan Sheridan that he broke just a couple of weeks ago. We talked about the pipeline that Joe Biden approved a couple of weeks ago. We talked about housing on the program. Like, I try with everything to stay focused on the issues. But unfortunately, a lot of people, they get a little bit bogged down by all this fighting online. And I think maybe because it's psychologically comforting, because it's like a distraction from the looming apocalypse that we're all facing. But try not to let it bog you down. And I'm going to try again to double down on my effort to not use Twitter as frequently and to not argue with other people on Twitter, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. Period. Another super sticker. Thank you so much, Celeste. Yes, it's noise. Stay focused. Yes. If somebody said something on their show about a podcast host that you don't like, let it go. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. Who cares? Hungry still. Only make fun of right-wingers on Twitter. As you should. Mark asked with a $5 super chat. Love seeing Charlie Kirk get owned in the debate yesterday. Yeah, how amazing was that debate? I actually think that was one of the most constructive debates as far as debates go. Vosh hit it out of the park. I was really, really, really impressed. He did a great job. Seeing Charlie Kirk get owned, especially in that anti-vax section, that was That was beautiful. It was too perfect. Okay, folks. I don't know about, so I don't follow, there's a couple of portions of Twitter that I don't follow. I don't follow like tanky Twitter, and I don't follow the K Hive. So I'm not necessarily sure, but yeah, I'm not sure about that. Couldn't watch more than 20 minutes of it. Charlie Kirk is insufferable, so I don't blame you, Mr. Anderson. I don't blame you. Yeah, so this is a good point. Honestly, I had the Ohio election up on one screen, and I had the debate up on the other screen, and the debate actually kind of like kept me distracted from getting too like freaked out. But I mean, I still was freaking out. Yeah, the featured content creator was incredible. K-Hive is insane. Yeah, I saw one of them. They came at me when I tweeted about Nina Turner's loss, and I like quote tweeted them because it's like, well, I mean, you clearly wanted my attention, so I'm gonna give it to you and quote tweet you. And then they like, I think they like, I don't know if they deleted it, but they put their account on private or something, which made me feel bad because I don't want them to feel targeted. But I mean, if you're tweeting at me and you're telling me to go fuck myself, I'm going to assume that you that you want me to see it, right? I did not see this, Winston. So Brooklyn Dad backpedaled in his defense of Cuomo. It doesn't surprise me. It does not surprise me. Yeah. Oh, what was the name? Spencer Snyder. That was his name. Yeah. I was inspired by Celeste. Shadow Draken, thank you so much for the $2 super chat. Are you talking about the video game Celeste? Because if so, that is a great inspirational game. I love that. Well, folks, I think that's about everything that's on my heart. Oh, this Celeste. Okay. Oh my God. Thank you, Celeste, for inspiring Shadow Dragon. I'm thinking the video game Celeste, but of course, the Celeste that we have in the chat. Okay, folks. Well, we'll leave that there. I will see you all next week. Take care, everyone.